Hey, everybody, Monday once again, and my guest is my very, very good friend, Mr. Carmen Rizzo. Carmen, how are you, sir?
Andrew, wow. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having me on your show.
Dude,
Really,
want
I
to.
don't
I
feel
have to
worthy.
say thank you that I actually have a career, basically. So we can go back to that. But look, we got to start with the fact that you're in your loft in downtown LA and your
Yeah.
espresso machine is broken.
Yeah. And I'm now drinking my coffee with a French press, which is good. But my ritual is to make the espresso, do it a certain way. And out of nowhere, it's not working this morning. So I had to go back in time to the
And are you
French press.
using the same beans, or do you have different beans for the French press?
I'm not that sophisticated. It's the same shit. You just put it in there and you
Yeah.
throw down. So I'm not a purist at anything, whether it's music or coffee, but I'm mixing it up this morning with
With
a
the French
different cup
press.
of
Well, that's
coffee.
right. Well, I'll join you. I'm having. You don't even want to know. It's instant, man. That's how low
It's
I've
not
gone.
tea. It's not tea for
It's
you.
instant coffee. It's yeah. I just I
Maybe
don't.
you can't get coffee out there in your farm or
You
something.
can get coffee, but it's the thing where, like it used to be, I would drink a pot of coffee easy myself,
Yeah,
no
I
problem.
remember. I know. I
So it would
remember.
be worth getting it all dirty and having to take the filter out and wash the thing and whatever. But now I have like one cup in the afternoon and one cup at night, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not, and
Well,
caffeine
that's
messes
fair.
me up. So half the time I'm having decaf, and it's like fuck, just
Yeah.
instant done.
But
It's
for
an
me,
English
it's the
thing.
ritual. I like the ritual of, you know, the beans, preparing it, if you want steamed milk, etc. So
Yeah, my thing is if I can't just pour boiling water on it, then I'm not
yeah,
having it.
all right.
So,
All right.
but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about you and everything about you. Which I look, man. There's so much shit to cover. I'm super excited about this. I'm really, really happy we're doing it. But I want to start all the way back at the beginning because that's what we do. We go all the way back.
Okay.
Everybody's sort of rode in. And for you, you had your mom played piano and was the church organist, right?
I'm correct. Yes.
So there was always music going on
Yeah.
in the
So
house.
I'll try to make this quick, but it's
Don't bother. We got time.
okay. In a nutshell, my story was raised in Connecticut as a child, and then San Francisco Bay Area from fourth grade on. And I was fortunate that I was around a music household. My mother was a piano teacher, was the church organist, so I saw probably more funerals and weddings than anyone alive because she would take me to, I'd be playing under the organ in the church loft while she was doing funerals and weddings, mainly funerals for some reason, but nevertheless. So I was always around music, right? So she was teaching piano and I was a drummer. That was my main thing, was being drummer. And I was lucky. I was pretty good back then. And I was in these bands as a young kid and making the big jazz bands and the local county bands and things like this. But I wanted to be a baseball player. And that was my dream. And because you're a Mets fan, we have a baseball passion. Um, I wanted to be a baseball player. So I took my music to a point, and then I was like, I don't want to do music. So I pursued baseball as far as I could go.
And this was
And then,
starting at like how old? When did you sort of stop playing drums and just
I
focus on
mean, like high
baseball?
school, I was just like, I mean, kind of high school, I started to fade away because I was in bands, but I was like, fucking, I don't want to be in bands so much. I want to be a ball player. So I was good, I thought, and I was making the teams. And then I made this like American Legion team or something where we were a big travel team and our coach was a scout for the Phillies and we had these uniforms. I was like, man, this is going to happen. Well, I made the team and then I didn't play much. And then
Right.
everybody was really good and I wasn't as good as I thought. So then I said to myself, well, I better go back to music, right? But I didn't want to be a musician or on that side of the glass anymore. I wanted to learn engineering and producing and things like this.
And how did you discover that was even a thing?
It wasn't a thing because back then there was no gear. I mean, nobody could afford, like, reverbs were like $15,000 and consoles were.
Yeah. So how did you find out about like that side of the record making process and decide that's what you wanted to find out about?
It just was interesting from, I don't really know what sparked the interest, but it just interested me. And so there was a school in San Francisco called College of Recording Arts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably one of the only schools available at the time. And all my friends went to college, and we didn't have a lot of money, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, I'm going to go learn this skill. So I went to school in San Francisco for 1 year, without a doubt, the least likely to succeed, because a lot of the guys in the school had bands, and they had like reel-to-reel tape machines and synthesizers, and they were just like making shit, you know? And I didn't have anything really, you know? And I was lost. And so I guided through this school from the grace of God. I don't know how I graduated for 1 year. And then I was like, okay, I got this piece of paper, a diploma. So then I said, well, you can go to New York, Nashville, or Los Angeles. So I was like, my sister lives in LA. I had $1,000, and I packed my car and I drove to LA. And then this is where my journey starts, which is I found a job at Westlake Studio.
Right.
So yeah.
I'm just curious though, because there's a pretty good studio scene up in the Bay Area. Was it more that you didn't really want to stay home, or you just felt like you had to get to the center of it, which, like you say, was those 3 cities? I felt like I had to get in the
center, and I was one of those kids was like, thanks for raising me, I'm out.
Right.
I never went home. I mean, forever. Like I love my parents, you know, may they rest in peace, but I had no desire to see friends. It was like, thanks for the 4 years, like fuck off, I'm out. So, you know, high school. So I left. And then I was at Westlake, and this is where it starts, which is for young people, you know, we can talk about this a bit later, but I had this burning urgency, right? And so I was the janitor in the morning, and then I was the runner during the day. And then I would just hang out and like in the shop and learn how to solder cables, or wait till the session was over and tear down the gear and like, what's this? And why was the microphone facing that way? And then all these like, and this is during 1984, 85
right,
or something like this. So the clients at this was like Michael Jackson.
Yeah,
like,
they just finished Thriller, right? When you got there,
just finished
basically.
Thriller, and we'll talk about the Bad album.
Yeah,
which, you know the story. So, and then I was that was my education, was sleeping at the studio. And then eventually I was an assistant engineer. I mean, I'm kind of fast forwarding, but at other studios. And then we would use the studio as your education. I mean, I can remember getting to a point where I was working at Westlake and like meeting girls and be like, hey, you want to sing to Thriller? And like fucking be with my mates and like, hey, go in the vault and put up that safety of Thriller or something. And like that vocal just hit mute. And somebody's like singing along. I mean, dude, there was some crazy shit at that studio when I think about what went down. And that was my education. And then I fast forward to working for someone, which is named John Barnes, which is how we met.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of my career, because John was one of the few people, as you know, who at that time had a studio.
Yeah.
Because studios if you didn't work at like a Ocean Way or Record Plant or Sunset Sound or something like this, you didn't work. So he had his own studio, and we vibed, and he's like, you want to engineer, you want to mix, you want to record, you want to program. And that was when I got schooled on technology, which I owe my whole life and my career to, which I based it on technology. And that is when we met.
Yeah. Well, hold on, but let's go back just a second, because I want to get the. So you're at Westlake and you're still the runner, but so did you ever get to assist at Westlake, or were you assisting somewhere else because they wouldn't have you come up and start assisting?
No, I was running, and then I was assisting occasionally. Like I remember getting opportunities, like, you know, Ed Cherney, may he rest in peace, was on a session, or Michael B, or Ray when he was doing the Luther Vandross, or Steve Levine when he was doing Culture Club and Beach Boys, or Tina Marie with Bobby Brooks. I would get in on sessions and I would assist, but it was very short-lived, right? Because then I was finding other opportunity at other studios around town. But when I worked for John, I felt like this was my big break.
And so did you meet John on a session that you were assisting, or how'd you meet John?
I honestly don't even remember how I met John. I think actually now it's coming to me, and forgive me for not knowing this. I think it was when Ron Tape, remember?
Yeah.
The slip and slide. Just another conversation, which, he just recently passed away.
Oh, right. And I didn't know.
Yeah, Ron Tape. But I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that story, but
I don't know.
I guess we can. So there were, I think this is how I met John, actually. So if I'm allowed to tell the story.
Only you know if you're allowed to tell the story.
Well, I'll just tell the story.
if there's a hit halfway through this interview, we'll know you weren't supposed to tell it.
Yeah, if I get shot in the head and the back. I don't know if John came first or second. I think John came second. Somehow somebody turned me on to a group of guys who are from Fort Myers, Florida. Wonderful crew doing hip hop. And great musicians, wonderful people, loved working with them. And they had this studio on Melrose Place. Remember?
Yeah.
You've been there. Melrose near La Cienega. And state-of-the-art gear. And then I was learning all this stuff. And we were making these records. And I think that's when they somehow brought John in. And that's how we met. I mean, just so that the people listening know the complicated part of the story, which I didn't know anything about. There was some unlawful things going on that they went away for a while, and
enough said.
That I didn't see anything.
No. Enough said. Enough said.
They were wonderful people. Ron unfortunately served life in prison, but then he got out and called me, and I helped him. And then he just recently passed away, actually, like 1 month ago.
Wow.
Coincidentally. And so that's how John basically took over the studio, how I remember it. My memory serves.
Yeah, because I mean, it was his place when we met. So that it must probably would have just happened,
Yeah, because I worked for those guys for a few years doing everything. And I guess I'm only bringing this story up because nowadays, everybody has a studio, everybody has gear in their bedroom. But back then, technology was starting and it was very expensive. And John, who was a very successful session player in town, had money and he had gear, and he was ahead of not just like a DX7, but he had a Synclavier and a Fairlight and samplers. So we were learning this gear, and that was how we met, because you were a technician for New England Digital. I came in to
fix the Synclavier. Yeah.
And I was like, who's this cool guy? And then we just became good mates. And then
yeah, almost immediately. I mean, first of all, when I walked in and saw you, I thought, holy shit, Prince is here.
I had long hair then.
You had the long hair, but also you had the coolest shoes I had ever seen. There were these like black and white checked patent leather shoes of some
Doc
description.
Martens, yeah.
They were
back then style. You had to have swag to do anything. And
they were awesome. That's an LA studio thing, because I had other people say like, "Look, man, your shoes. It's the most important thing."
You got
people remember that.
It's a deal breaker.
And I got clown feet, so I could never have cool shoes.
No,
my shoes were always like whatever fit. But
you have to remember something too, though. That was when I was being mentored by Susan Rogers, and so for whatever reason, I resembled Prince, I guess, especially I had long hair, but I was rolling with the whole camp.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going down to Purple Rain when they were filming it.
So, all right, I want to back up 1 second and then we'll pick up right there, because that's we got to talk about that for a little while. But I want to know, like, growing up, what music were you listening to? Like, what were you into? So once you decided you wanted to do music, you decided like, okay, this is the kind of record I want to make.
My parents weren't really exposing me to current music. We were listening to like Count Basie and like Andrews Sisters and like kind of more big band stuff, to be honest.
Right.
And I would go to my neighbor's house, and we would hang out, and I would never forget when Elton John was really big, and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was, like records like, whoa, what's this? So that was through friends I was exposing, but I have to say that I didn't really have a fixture of like, these are the kinds of records that I was into, because I was just more into whatever was going on, like the English beat and, you know, psychedelic furs and like that sound of the 80s, which was in, but I wouldn't say that I yearned to make those records, because when I was working with John, we were doing, you know, working with Michael Jackson and more urban, a lot of R&B
as well,
R&B stuff. So I was getting schooled by the best, and like I was working, you know, he was exposing me to meeting, you know, Lenny Kravitz when he was Romeo Blue, and I'm like, you know, he's dating. I'll never forget. Like he comes in with Tony Lamons, who was on Prince's label before he died, and this guy with Lisa Bonet sleeping on the floor. And his name was Romeo. I didn't know who the fuck he was. And he's playing, he's like, yeah, let's do some bass. And then fast forward, he's fucking Lenny Kravitz. So it was, you know, he was exposing me to people before they were big, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've got to say, like, one of the, obviously John, a monster programmer and keyboard player and all the rest of it, but his ability to arrange things was kind of insane. Like to find that one tiny little keyboard part you didn't know you needed that you definitely needed, and all that kind of stuff.
Or going off the grid, like owning a synclavier and pretty much using it for FM synthesis, which most people don't even use it for FM. They use it for sampling, because back then it was a $200,000 sampler.
Yeah.
But he was like, I use it for FM.
Yeah.
Yes, I own the DX7. I own everything, all the Yamaha Roland. So things like this. Also, this is a good story. If it's okay to interject with a story.
Of course. Oh, that's the whole point of this.
Another great thing with John was, I don't know if you remember Richard Lawson. Do you remember Richard Lawson?
Yeah, I remember the name. It's going to come back to me.
We were introducing to people before. So a couple years ago, I'm at the Beyonce concert at Dodger Stadium, because I know her tour manager. So we're in the green room or some room. And this guy comes up to me. He goes, Carmen. I go, Richard. I give him a big hug. I'm like, fuck, man, what are you doing here? I haven't seen you in like 100 years. He's like, I'm Beyonce's dad. And he married her mom.
Wow.
But it was just the people that I think about, I met through John back then, because back then he was a very big actor. And he was a music manager, and we were producing a band that he was managing.
Right. Okay, so how in all of this do you meet Susan Rogers?
So, wow, I could do a whole podcast on this.
Let's do it.
When I was working at Westlake Studios, and I was educating myself in the shop. So for the people listening back then, studios had shops, and that's where the hottest shit individuals, men and women, worked, because you could tweak a tape machine, you could learn how to align it, you made custom mods for consoles. And you know, Andrew, whether it was Conway or Westlake or Sunset Sound, Record Plant, the techs were the stars of the studio, right?
Yeah.
So there was a guy named John Sacchetti.
Yeah.
You know John.
Yeah.
He's crazy.
Yeah. And Susan talked about him too, and did his accent really well too.
John is a living legend, and I owe a lot to him, because he was mentoring me. And then he taught me everything, like everything from soldering cables the right way to mods and consoles and things like this, and modding tape machines. So then he was dating Susan Rogers. And Susan Rogers, as you know, if you've listened, well, for the people who listened, she was Prince's engineer for the heyday, and is an iconic music maker, you know.
And if anybody doesn't know, after this, go watch the interview with her, because it's amazing. She's
a living legend, and she's an incredible human being. So they were dating, and so John and I were in a band together. And I don't even know if you knew this, but we were in a band together with Jonathan Melvoin and David Coleman.
Oh, really?
In peace. Yeah. So they are the brother and sister of Wendy and Lisa from Prince's band, who I did a lot of work with Andrew, which we can talk about later. And so we had this band. So Jonathan, David, me and John. And so we would nerd out and do music. And Susan was Prince's engineer. So that's how I met Susan. And so we would just hang out with Susan, and she would be like, hey, Prince is doing this movie. Why don't you come down to the complex, hang out with us? Really? Okay. So we go down to the complex, and we were seeing him film Purple Rain. I'll never forget. I'm like getting chills of saying that. And then it would be things like, Susan would say, hey, we like, where's Susan? And she'd be in the studio at Sunset Sound for like a fucking week straight, not coming up for air, because Prince back then would make a record. And then how he would test it is he would go to Carlos and Charlie's, the club on Sunset, or the other club at the Beverly Center underground, and he would play it. He would go right from Bernie Grumman from the ref. He would master it with Bernie, take it right to the fucking club, and see if people would dance. So Susan would say, meet me at the club, I'll get you in. And you'd see people's reaction. It was unbelievable when I think about those days. So that's how I met Susan. And then she would teach me stuff, and yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah, because she'd come out of that shop only like 2 years before to go work for Prince, right?
Yeah, I remember going to Minneapolis to visit her in like fucking March, and her Christmas tree would be up. I'm like, Susan, why's your fucking Christmas tree up? She's like, Prince sent me to LA and I never came back.
Yeah.
So she had a rough life, but she had a glamorous life in a funny way.
And from the way she talks about it, I'm sure in the moment there were bits of it that were harder than she lets on, really, but she loved it. Does no regrets, absolutely loved all of it. So
I would assume, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was exactly what she wanted to do. So, all right, well, you brought him up. So, well, hold on. Before we get to Wendy and Lisa, though, so you do have a credit on a Beach Boys record. So that's one of those Westlake records you got to assist on a little bit. But I wanted to ask you, and look, this is the internet, so who the hell knows what's true and what's not. But what's the deal with the Kristen Vigard album?
So I was fortunate that when I was young, really young, because I was booking sessions at like Capitol and all these big studios, and like the assistants were like twice my age, and I was like the engineer and mixer or producer. I'm like, how the fuck did I get so lucky? But it was really because I started so young, where like at 19, me moving here, right? So the Kristen Vigard record, to fast forward to that, was that there was an A&R guy in town called Jamie Cohen. I don't know if you remember Jamie, but he was working at Majors. And then there was a record company called Private Music that was owned by Peter Baumann, who was, I think that's how I pronounce his last name. He was one of the founding members of Tangerine Dream. And it was a label through BMG. And so I met Jamie, we really vibed. He liked what I was doing. And he says, hey, I signed this girl. Do you want to produce her? And we met, and it was all fell into place. And at the time, because you played on that, or no? Did you
I don't think so. No, I don't think I worked on that one at all. But it's just like you go from no credits at all to a couple of assistant credits, and then it's produce, record, mix, everything on that record.
Because so basically with Kristen, and it goes back to, if we talk about mentoring other people, it's about a community. And back then in Los Angeles, there was this crew that I was rolling with of like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Fishbone, and Dia Davenport from Brand New Heavies, Amp Fiddler, Bronx Style Bob, the list, which maybe not all of you know these people, but they were really big back then. Like Chili Peppers weren't even signed, I don't think. Maybe they were. And Kristen and I were like, let's make this record. And we were doing something back then, like hiring a bass clarinet, a clarinetist on a record. Like, what the fuck is a bass clarinet? Or string quartet, which back then you were doing orchestras. So then we were working with Chili Peppers. And so then people knew me. So then they were like, hey mate, I'm doing my record. Do you want to produce it? Or like Jill Jones from Prince's band too. So that's how it started.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Amazing. But obviously, when you get the opportunity, then you find out that you're someone who actually should have gotten that opportunity. Absolutely.
Well, I was just lucky. It was luck, man. I take no
Yeah,
credit.
but you make your own luck. But all right, look, let's talk a little bit about Wendy and Lisa, because it's around what 88, 89 that you so you're credited with some remixing on Fruit at the Bottom, but what did you do on that one?
So because of Susan, I knew the Prince camp, right? So Wendy and Lisa and I became very good friends. And then when they split up with the Revolution, they said, do you want to work for us? We're going to go on tour. I'm like, okay. So then I was engineering for them. I think Fruit at the Bottom might have, no, I engineered, and I don't know what the hell I did on that record, I can be honest, but I worked on that record. I did some remixing as well. And then I went on tour with them in 89 in Europe, which was fucking fun. I have to tell you that. Because they were really big back then. And so that's how I'd parlayed to Wendy and Lisa. And then we worked quite a bit. And then, of course, we brought you in on a bunch of stuff as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because, I mean, jumping ahead to Eroica, which is a few years later, actually, it only came out a year later. Still one of my favorite records. That is just a genius record. Really great. And
and I learned a lot from them, because if there's any females listening, I always mention the story, because it's back then they would get angry at people saying, you're a great female bass player, or
right.
You know what I mean? And then she's like, fuck off. I'm a great bass player who happens to be female. And I'm really sensitive to that, because I know when I used to work at Native, I would struggle with like a lot of the female music makers would be like, don't put me on because I would rub heads with some of the people at Native, because they would be like, let's do an all-female thing. And I say, sure. But a lot of the female music makers that I was talking to was like, no, how you fix it is you make a panel.
Yeah.
Not a female songwriting camp. And I'm only saying that because Wendy and Lisa made that clear in my mind back then of, we are great musicians who happen to be female. And I think that's how you should look at it. And they were two of the best musicians I've ever worked with in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, transcend, because Wendy is a fantastic bass player. She's also a motherfucker of a drummer.
Everything, writer,
guitar,
producer,
singer,
they're
all
just
of it.
Badasses.
And Lisa on a piano or a B3 is one of the best things you could ever hear, ever.
Well, Susan Rogers gave the best quote. She says to me, Lisa, chords must wake you up in the middle of the night and ask you to play me. Because she finds these chords that nobody plays that chord.
Yeah. That's a really funny way to put it, but it is like that. It's incredible.
Yeah,
so,
they're wonderful women, and I owe them a lot.
All right. So another record right around the same time that I know you've spoken about it a lot. One of your favorite artists is Ryuichi Sakamoto.
Oh,
so
if I had to die with one credit, it would be that.
Really, that's the one. Well, let's hear about how it came about, but then also why it's so important to you. Like, what is it about that project?
Well, my mantra always, Andrew, and I've spoken countless in master classes and things, is that nobody cares how much you get paid. No one knows, and no one cares. They're not going to ask you, how much did you get paid for that Coldplay record, that gold record there? They just say, you worked on that Coldplay record? You worked on this record, you worked on that record. That's all they care. And with Ryuichi, when I say that I worked with Ryuichi, people just bow down, because he is one of the most incredible, well-respected music makers in the world. And I'm grateful to work on that Beauty album, which is a fantastic album. And when I think about how he worked, and I guess to answer your question, how did I get that gig? I owe Virgin Records, because I don't know if this is in your chronological order, if I'm boring you, but there's a record of Sheb Khaled that I did with Don Was. That is another record that I owe a lot of my career, because it introduced me to world music. And at that point, I was doing work for Virgin at that time, and with Don and Gemma at Virgin. And so Ryuichi was in town and needed an engineer. So they called me. It's like, okay. And I didn't really know a whole lot about Ryuichi, really. And then I met him at Sound Castle, which is a studio used to be in Silver Lake at the time. And we worked and we really liked each other. And then I worked at other studios and did a lot of stuff with him. And it just blew my mind. I mean, there's a story that I'll never forget, Andrew. We were at Sound Castle and the big SSL and all the gear, and we're recording and he's doing a solo, and he had really long hair at the time, and he ties it up and he puts the white tape around it, for the console. And he goes, in his broken Japanese accent, he says, okay, when the solo section comes up, mute the monitors, but make sure you're in record. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, turn the monitors off so I don't hear anything. So he wanted to do this synth solo in time with music, and it fucking worked. And it was just it really blew my mind, because he was just always going against the grain in anything he did.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, and you hear there are other stories like that, like Radiohead guitar overdubs where they turn off the headphones and then keep playing. But you've got to be a pretty extraordinary musician to have anything good at the end of that, because it's anyone can play not listening. But
because I remember at one point we were going through the samples for his show and loading him in samplers, and just the sounds that he was getting back then from instruments that were so ahead of its time that it was really inspiring to me. And I think that really opened up my eyes of doing eclectic music.
Right.
That I didn't, because back then I was very good at listening. That was one thing that I learned from the school, is they would say, listen to this record and close your eyes and try to pick out every instrument. What instrument is playing that frequency or that part? And if it's horns, what kind of horn? Is it a French horn? Is it a trombone? Things like this. So it really educated me of how to listen. So there was a point where I could listen to a record on the radio and say, that's a DMX clap, that's a Lindrum, but it's tuned down, or that's a Wendell sample because it's not on a drum machine, or that's an Oberheim. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I knew immediately where that, and that's what made me I thought at the time, a good drum programmer, because I was learning from Susan how Prince was tuning the LM1.
Right.
Because that was the art of his drum programming. Part of one of the arts was the tuning. Because if you know that drum machine, you could tune it.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's hard to sort of keep in your head what it was like when those were the instruments you had, as opposed to now you got 50 different sample libraries of Lindrum or the DMX or whatever. And I'm not making the argument that the hardware is better, but it's just completely different.
Well, it's all you have. I always tell people the best records I made was when I had nothing.
Yeah.
I had a drum machine, a sampler, and a keyboard.
Yeah.
And that's all I had. And I could run it blindfolded and make great records. And if you look at the Prince records, because I would study those fucking Prince records. Like, I knew what reverb, what patch, I knew exactly what instrument. If you tell me a solo on a song, I know exactly. Because with Prince, as an example, if people are listening, if they're Prince fans, he was a technologist. Yes, he was a badass motherfucker on everything, writing, musicianship, playing, but he was a technologist. Susan would say, a new piece of gear would come out and we would make a record with that piece of gear. And if you listen to his records, there's a 909 Roland. It's all over it. Or
the D50. He ruined the D50 for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the Fairlight. There were samples on the Fairlight that were factory sounds. You knew it. Housequake, things like this. The guitar synth. His fucking, Roland made that guitar synth, which is where he got that thing that goes around the neck to the body of the guitar. He stole that kind of design for his trademark a little bit at one point. I don't know, but influenced. But that sound was over Under the Cherry Moon, as an example.
Right.
So the point is, he would, and Sue would say, a piece of gear would come, and that was all we would use until he was burned out, and then he would move on. or the Prophet VS. You know, I could go down the list. I knew every instrument, every reverb, everything.
Right. Right. It's amazing. Amazing. Because it is a really weird sort of ear training, but it's really important because that means when you're on a record and someone's referencing something, you know exactly where to go to do it.
Well, because record, and I don't want to sound like this fucking old man, but that's why I like left of center albums. And this is not showing me being older. It's just that when records start to sound the same, it's fucking boring. And Prince at the time was making records that didn't sound like other people.
Right.
And things like, you know, using white noise for sounds or tuning a cymbal as low as it can go for longer decay. But when you hear records that sound exactly like the next record you heard on the radio, it's like, does everybody have to dress the same, you know?
No, it's new once, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, speaking about this LA crew you're running around with, you also worked on a Fishbone record, right?
I did, yeah.
Boning in the Boneyard.
Became really good friends with those guys. And right around the same period as the Chili Peppers, which, yeah, it's just, I gravitated to Fishbone more. And in retrospect, I'll never forget those guys. I'll never forget sitting down with the Chili Peppers and them saying, hey, we got a record deal. So do you want to work with us? I didn't work with them. Boy, was that a mistake.
So is that the extent of that story? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, we were friends, all those guys, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, because you did a lot of Chili Pepper records, and you know them much better than I know them.
Well, yeah, but I didn't know them back then. Yeah.
Yeah, and back then, Fishbone was bigger than Chili Peppers.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
And yeah, I don't know. We just talked about working together, and you know, it's all about urgency and timing, and it just never happened.
Right. Right. But you did work on the Fishbone record. So
yeah, we did Fishbone, and that's where I met David Kahn, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, which I didn't realize David did their logo.
Did he really?
Yeah. Yeah, on like a Mac Plus or something when he was still up in the Bay Area. It's crazy.
Wow.
I mean, you just like if you look at the later credits, you would never think that he was part of Fishbone for so long and such a huge part of it.
Well, he signed him. He was an A&R guy at Columbia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. I think this brings us up to the Khaled record with Don Was. We should definitely talk about that because it first of all, just working with Don, especially back then. I mean, the guy's a superstar back then because Was Not Was having huge hits.
And this was the peak of his career. He was really peak of his career. And I was an honor to work with him. And he said, hey man, I'm doing this French record. It's this guy named Sheb Khaled, and he's from Algeria. And he has all these records doing rhyme music in North Africa, but this is his first major release on Barclay in France. Should we do it? I'm like, yeah, let's do it, you know? So we do this record, and that's when I met Jamie Mahobarak, who's one of my best friends, and we went making countless records since then. And this record was maybe the biggest record in my career besides Seal, because it introduced me to the French market. And we did a song which is called Didi, which is to this day an anthem in France. And if you're Arab speaking or North African or Parisian, to this day, it's that song comes on and it's like, you know, Hey Jude or something. I mean, it's a big deal. And so we did that together, and it was great. And so then I met a lot of French people and labels that allowed me to continue my career, where I was making so many records in France. I had a French manager, a French bank account. I was there more than US. So
and did your head sort of explode when you started hearing all this music? Because you hadn't really been exposed to too much of it before, had you?
I hadn't. And then it was like you discovered something for the first time, you know?
Yeah.
And I was into him singing in Arabic and like these different instruments that I wasn't familiar with, you know, oud and darbuka, and go down the list. And then going to France and staying in Barbès and La Chapelle, where nobody speaks French. They only speak Arabic. And I was just, it was incredible. It was a beautiful experience because it was like I hadn't lived before. And it felt really natural for me. And then I was getting records from labels there like Ecova and I'll go down the long list. I won't bore you with these French records. But
no, I'm going to bore you with them if you don't.
Well,
bore
like
me with them
Zebda,
first.
and then I was hanging out. It was unbelievable because then it was the beginning of my future, where I felt that I was this bridge of infusing East and West and electronic with indigenous organic music from the region, which fast forwarding got me to Russia and Kazakhstan and Tuva and all these other wonderful places.
Yeah, well, and we're going to talk about a lot of those records, but the Khaled record, did you make that in France or just
no? We made it
in LA?
The Chapel, which was
right
in the Valley.
Yeah, Dave Stewart's place,
his old place.
Right.
Yeah,
right. Which we worked there a few times. Can't remember
I think
what.
We did some. I did a lot of records there. I did Seal there. There's a lot of records. It was a great
and
place.
And right across the street from Richard Feldman, who you introduced me to because he needed an assistant at one point. Yeah,
that's right, in the Valley.
Yeah, amazing. Wow. Well, all right, look, before we get into the world thing, we still have some American stuff to get through because the very next year you've got huge records, but the first one I want to talk about is Bronx Style Bob. Because that Bronx Style Bob record came out in '92, and holy shit, what a great record.
That was a great record. Yeah, Bob was a wonderful artist, and we worked on that together. And then, again, kind of like the Chris and Vigard, there was lots of local, wonderful musicians that were participating on that record, like John O'Brien, who passed away, and Joel Shear, and many other wonderful people. The Fishbone guys, again, played on that. And that was really fun because that allowed me to experience studios and techniques. And, I don't know, it just really, it kind of allowed me to take a giant leap forward because I remember working at Studio 55. I think we did that record, which is not in existence anymore.
Yeah.
Which is where they recorded White Christmas, that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then I did years there with John when he had a room there.
Exactly. And I'll never forget, that was when I felt like a community where I was in one room always working, and this guy named Jack Joseph Puig was in the other room, and he was doing Jellyfish. And I'd hang out with Jack. He was like, "So what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing this Jellyfish record." "Oh, what are you doing on this Bronx Style Bob?" And he'd show me stuff. And we were just like, there was a beautiful time of record making because there were colleagues of mine we were all at the same, like hanging out with Alan Meyerson. Like I'm mixing in one room and Alan's making records and just trading things, or Dave Way, or just, we were all just young music makers. And I remember Bronx Style Bob, Jack in specific, it was just nice being, making records with these guys in the same building.
But also, it seems as though that's the beginning of your kind of building your own crew. Because you talk about you would be working with people as part of their crews and whatever, but you had a crew, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that crew for quite a long time, which was amazing. But did you meet Joel on that record? You met him because of Super 8?
I met him because of Bob, I think. He was a young kid, but I was somebody, as you can vouch for, I'm a loyalist. Like if people know me, like I pride myself on having a really good circle of friends, male, female, old, young, it doesn't matter. Just if you're in my crew, you're a good person, and I like to share people and connect people. And back then, I wasn't interested in like hiring Michael Boddicker or, the big session players. It's like, I got Andrew Sheps. I got fucking Joel Shear.
Yeah,
I got
Jamie,
this person.
Chris Bruce. Chris Bruce, Jamie.
Chris Bruce. I mean, who's
hell.
one of my favorite musicians of all time. Jimmy Mahobrak. It was like, I
Earl.
don't need those guys because I have these people, and these, if I have $1 or $1 million, I'm hiring them. Doesn't matter. So I was a loyalist, and people were discovering them, like, who is Chris Bruce? This fucking guy is incredible. Or who is Andrew Sheps? And I was like, exactly. Don't forget these people, because they're the next generation.
Yeah.
And so it obviously paid off because
Well, absolutely. I mean, you had a great phrase for it, which is, spreading the love. It's like you could hire people, so of course you're going to hire people.
exactly, because I never understood that, Andrew. I would see people have success and they would shut the door. And I was like, why would you not want to open the door and have your friends come in? And I'm not saying I was successful, but I would have slivers of
You were successful
at moments where I was working in big studios. I had budgets to pay people. I'm like, I'm paying my friends. I'm not doing them favors. They're really good and they deserve it. And if I can help someone else, I'm going to help them. That's just how it works.
and
You
it's
just do. That's
it's
what you
brilliant.
do.
You've helped so many people through so much shit. And
Thank you.
so first of all, everybody has to go listen to the Bronx Style Bob record, Grandma's Ghost. But the other thing is, there's a really bizarre baseball connection to that record that I think you should tell the fans about.
I don't know that story.
Yeah, no, you do. Bob's like the guy who was doing a lot of programming with Bob was the
he's a
son
Yankee
of.
fan.
No, he was the son of, and I'm spacing on his name right now.
Oh my God, I'm drawing blank, man.
Are you? Oh God, I'm gonna have to look it up. He was the son of a pro baseball player.
Oh, Roy Campanella.
Yeah, exactly.
Roy Campanella Jr. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he was the grandson of Roy Campanella Sr. Yeah, his name was Roy Camp. It's right. That's how I met Roy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Glad I could help. So that same year, you work on a Jackson 5 record. Well, Jackson's record.
But Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Well, you got the Bad thing too, so we should talk about that when you went in to work on the Bad record.
Did I work on a Jackson's record? I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, you got credits on it, but maybe it was sort of an offshoot of a Michael session. I don't know.
Wow, I'll have to check that out. I mean, there was a time where I was introduced to the whole I played on the fucking Jackson 5 softball team at one point.
Wait,
About
what?
that. Because we were working with Jermaine.
Yeah.
And he knows my love for baseball. And his brother, Marlon, I think it was drafted by the Angels. So they had this like softball league. And he's like, yo, you want to play on the team? I'm like, I don't like softball, Jermaine. Sorry. Fuck softball. I played in a hardball fast pitch league. I'm like, all right, I'll show up. So we played in Beverly Hills for a minute, and then they didn't play as much. So I just said, I'm out. But I did work with the Jacksons. And here's a good Jermaine Jackson story. I always tell this story. So one of the greatest things with Jermaine is we would work at studios, and there'd be 2 analog tape machines, and it would say master and slave. And he would say, he wouldn't work in the room if it said slave. So he would make me tape over, and it would say master and drone, which was great, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
No one's ever done that.
Yeah.
That I've seen.
No, and it's still a thing. Like it's a word.
Is that a standard?
Well, it should be, but like trying to replace the word slave is difficult.
Yeah. But back then,
yeah,
he wouldn't work in the room. And I was like, no problem. It's boom. We did it. But so, yeah, I worked with Jermaine, and the Michael story, which is the classic story, which
come on.
This is the golden nugget for people. So I think you know this story, right?
Oh yeah. But that's all right. There are plenty of people who don't, and they're about to.
So, okay. So I don't know how much I can say of the story, but so we were working with Bill Bottrell. So I'm assuming people know who Bill Bottrell is, right?
Well, they ought to know. But I mean, the big thing in terms of the Michael Jackson camp was he did Black or White. He did that crazy middle eight on Black or White like himself.
Yeah, and he produced and engineered and mixed most of that record, I think, right?
Yeah, huge chunks of it. Yeah.
Or something. I don't know. But before that, Bill Bottrell is this incredibly talented producer, engineer, mixer. And his biggest records, I think, are ELO.
Right.
Electric Light Orchestra, which are very deep records. And he was just, when John was friends with him, and he would come in and do some engineering and mixing for us. And I was just like, who is this guy, John? I want to learn from this guy. He's doing stuff his stuff sounded like no one else's, right? It was like him and Mick Gazalski were doing things that They were like another level. So at the time, right, in between Thriller and Bad, Michael hired John Barnes and Bill Bottrell to really make all those songs. So I don't know the legal side of like songwriting credits or buyouts, but they were doing all that stuff, you know. So that shit was done. And then Sony or CBS at the time, here, Michael, here's your record budget of $1 zillion. Now go make your record with Quincy Jones and the late, great Bruce Swedien. So they had to replace what they already did. So they were getting calls to go fix it. So before that, John took me to Neverland. Is that what it's called? His house on Havenhurst.
Oh, no.
Or no.
Neverland was the ranch.
Okay, so sorry. I did not go to Neverland. I went to Havenhurst, which is the original Michael Jackson house.
Right, where they had the studio back by the pool. And
yeah. Have you been there?
Yeah, I went there a couple of times.
Okay, so I went there, and it was like, but Michael wasn't there, right? So we were like hanging out, and it was fucking animals and like the candy store. I'm like, wow, this is fucking cool. But there's no Michael Jackson. All right, whatever. Fast forward. Hey, can you come down to Westlake? This is when I'm working for John Barnes. Can you come down to Westlake? And we need to do some work. So John says, hey, Carmen, I got a call. Why don't you come with me? And this is like, no, this is pre-cell phone, pre-internet. And Michael's at the peak of his career. I mean, he just did Thriller. So it's at Westlake Studio D at the time, right? Yeah.
That's Bruce's favorite. Yeah.
Yeah. Not C. I'm showing my age. At one point, Westlake was just Beverly and then only Studio C, the API room. So we go, so he says, why don't you come with me in keyboard tech? I'm like, are you sure? He said, yeah, just come. Because this is like high security. So I fucking roll in there. We got Oberheim Expander, 81, the Yamaha 81, you know, the
TX-81Z, yeah.
Brought the arsenal, like the Sinclair. I set everything up. And I'm sitting in the control room. And John says, stay. I said, are you sure? He goes, yeah, stay. So before I come, I'm trying to think, I had to sign an NDA. I think I signed it when I left, now that I think about it. So I'm sitting in the control room, and there's John, and there's all this gear, and there's me, and there's Michael, Quincy, and Bruce. And they're doing The Way You Make Me Feel, you know, and John's doing that bass line, you know, and Michael says, we need some hand claps. So John says, hey, Carmen, break out the Lin 9000. Can you program these claps how Michael wants them, this and that? I'm like, really? Okay. So he took a picture. I have that picture actually, because John was one of the few people that Michael let him take photographs.
Right.
So he was just snapping away. You know, he always had his camera. So I'm this young kid, 21-year-old, whatever I was, sitting hunched over this Lin 9000, programming, and Michael telling me and turning it. I was right by those fucking monitors. And then I walk out and I had to sign an NDA and I never got credit. And it really breaks my heart because I tried to get I had a written letter from John, and I can't get a platinum record from the estate. I'm like, I have pictures to prove it. But because I wasn't listed on the credits, I couldn't get a gold record or a platinum record. So that's my Michael Jackson story. Man.
Well, and those hand claps, big part of that track.
Well, and I got to work with Michael Jackson. I know it's a bit of a petty story. It's insignificant, but it's fun.
It's not a petty story. It's awesome. I mean, just to be like one of the 5 people in that room. Like
that was a thrill. And then we went to the recording area where he was eating vegan, and the chefs, which I became friends with, there were these Sikhs and just eating and seeing him. And it was a wonderful experience just to be a part of that during that era.
Yeah. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. All right. So we're up to 1993. How's that feel? But we got 2 really interesting records. So first of all, Ray Charles. You worked on a Ray Charles record.
That was with Richard Perry, which was the most funniest. That was my first experience to drugs in a studio, if I can say that. Can I say that?
Yeah, you just did. So yes, you can.
Because I don't really do drugs. I never have really. I mean, besides weed and stuff. So I was always, nobody really included me in that stuff because they knew I didn't do it. So like if there was, we've all seen drugs in suit back then, especially. I mean, I saw it, but I didn't really participate because I just wasn't into it. And Richard Perry was like, oh my God. Like, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that, but like, we would be mixing till 5, 6 in the morning every night. And these automation passes, we did that at Andorra, which is Yoshiki's studio now. And that was when I experienced drugs and mixing just don't work because we were mixing the same song like fucking 5 days in a row. That was hard, but that was fun because Eric Clapton was on that record and it was a Ray Charles record. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say too much bad about that.
But I just mixed it. So I don't know.
And is that your only Richard Perry experience?
Yeah, because he was a great guy and has a great legacy. It was just hard because back then with automation, as you know, you're mixing, the console's fucking 75 faders or whatever, and you're mixing, okay, let's do another pass. We're going to ride this, because that, and he would forget the pass. I'm like, Richard, it's 5:30 in the morning. We just rode those guitars. Let's do it again,
Yes. Well, another record which I know you're proud of because we spoke about it quite a bit is the Eddie Murphy record.
Oh. Yeah, another life changer in my career because through John I met Eddie in his heyday, and he really liked me, and I liked him, and he's like, "You want to come work with me on and off?" I'm like, "Sure." Where? He's like, "Back in New York." Okay. So I would go back and forth, even though we didn't really put out a lot of music, a lot of stuff I can't say on air, but I could write a book on the incredible times I had working with Eddie Murphy, living with him on and off, meeting Chris Rock when he was a kid, Mike Tyson in the heyday, Whitney Houston. I mean, like going to clubs with Eddie Murphy in his heyday was.
That's insane. Because, yeah, I mean, this is 92, 93, like.
No cell phones, no internet, like walking in like me, Eddie, and 3 people. Or going to, well, some stories I can tell, like having dinner with Eddie at like 10 o'clock at night at home and him saying, should we go to the Comedy Store or whatever, the Laugh Factory, whatever it was called in New York, and just roll through. We get the town cars. One of us would have to go in like on a Tuesday night at 11:30 and say, Eddie's outside. He wants to preview his new comedy act. Can he just sit in? And then the MC would say, we have a special guest. And he would just post up and just run his act and test the audience.
They must have lost their minds.
They were like, this is fucking Eddie Murphy, Or we'd go to the theater. I don't know if this was in LA or New York. I can't remember. A third into one of his movies on a matinee, we'd sneak in the back and just sit in the back and listen to people, see if they were laughing.
Would you beat the crap out of them if they didn't laugh enough?
No, but they were those are the PG stories, but we had some good times. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And getting to know Charlie Murphy was, he wasn't a comedian back then. He was a boxer. So I didn't even know Charlie was a comedian until he became famous.
Wow.
Because he was funny in the crew, but he was a boxer, So it was great. I love Eddie and I love his whole crew, and I learned a lot from them, and I learned about loyalty through him,
Right.
Because he's just a great guy.
Just what a great thing to be able to do, So
Yeah, I got some good stories. It was fun.
yeah. Well, all right. So another guy you worked with starting around then and have worked with a lot since then is Seal. So
Yes.
let's get to the beginning of the Seal story.
So working with Wendy and Lisa, um, Seal had a big record, the first record with Crazy. He came to America. This is my recollection of it. He came to America. He decided at that point he wasn't going to work with Trevor Horn for whatever reason. And then somehow met Wendy and Lisa. I don't even know how they met. And the girls called me and said, there's this English guy, has the song, big record. We're going to do some writing and recording with him. Do you want to do it with us? I'm like, sure. Where are we going to do it? Up at the house. It's only a few weeks of work. Turned into 3 years.
Yeah.
And people getting fired and hired. And I kept making the cut until the very end with the record, you know, and working with the girls, working with Steve Lillywhite, working with Trevor. And then Seal's one of my best friends. And we go back 30 years. I play tennis with him a few times a week, even still. And it was a beautiful, the start of a beautiful, you know, relationship. And that was when that also helped me become schooled by Trevor Horn, because he mentored me. Because after, I'm fast forwarding, but after the Seal record, which is another conversation of the making of that record, he knew that I knew the Euphonics console. So he kept me around, and then he kept calling me. And then now Trevor was a client. So it goes back to me learning technology again that helped my career, because I knew the Euphonics desk and he owned one.
Yeah.
And so when he would come in town, so, but I learned a lot with Trevor, Andrew, you know, I learned the art of recording, not the art of mixing. That was when I learned that anybody could mix those records. The work was done in the recording.
Right.
You probably know from a little bit, you know, you push those faders up, it's there.
Well, so let's hear a little bit about making the record, because you said that's another story. And so let's tell that story for a minute.
Well, I just remember working with Trevor. He's very good. Some people, I mean, you've interviewed Steve Lipson probably, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Last week.
Oh, I got to watch that. He was very important in a lot of those classic Trevor records, right?
Yeah.
Very talented guy. But some might say, oh, Trevor's not around, you know, because there was a lot of the Seal record that, you know, a lot of the crew was doing the work, you know, like Jamie Mahobrak and myself and a long list of great people. But Trevor was the master of putting the frame around the picture. And when I think of that Seal record, the big one with Kiss of a Rose, and I think about, we would cut those songs, many different tempos, many different keys, many different musicians, many different studios over many years. But Trevor was the one that would be like, the verse starts with a real bass, then it finishes with a synth bass, and it goes back to a real bass. And you didn't know who played on the fucking record, because he was back then needle and threading parts, programming this and that, but it didn't matter, because when that record was done, it was a masterpiece. And when you threw those faders up, the work was done. The work was done.
Let me ask you a question about this, because it just occurred to me. So with Trevor, with Rick Rubin, people get on them for the fact that, oh, they're not there all day, every day necessarily. And sometimes they are, first of all, because they are. But they put together crews who, as you say, can do stellar work, but they are absolutely the people at the end of the day saying, like, no, this is the thing. But the way you just described making that record is exactly the way you would describe every single Steely Dan record. Get 15 different rhythm sections to cut a song, whereas people, like, put them up on a pedestal and, like, that's, oh my God, the best thing ever. But somehow Trevor gets vilified for it.
Which is really unfair, because, you know, the problem I shouldn't say problem. The interesting thing of young music makers today is that not all of them experience making an album.
Yeah.
They make a song, and there's like a million writers, a million people who participate on a record, right? But making an album is a very specific skill set. And you know from making countless albums, Andrew, not all records are throw up a microphone and hit record, and there's the record. Sure, there are those records, but a lot of well-crafted records take a very specific skill set. And I can't speak for Rick because I've never worked with him, but I know you have. Piecing a record together is hard. And in the sense of Seal, of how these songs were written, having that relationship as a producer, what to get out of him, he was a master of it. And I still think Trevor Horn should go down in the history of one of the best record makers in the history of time. That's just my opinion, not only as a fan of his work, but participating in those records.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, you know, there's some producers who put less of a sonic imprint on records than others, and he puts more of one on, but the same way Daniel Lanois puts a huge sonic imprint on a record. But I think your description of the fact that he's making the album is exactly it. There's a cohesion to all of those records, the Propaganda records, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Seal, all of the Yes
Jones,
albums,
ABC,
Grace Jones.
Yeah.
All of them, the first Simple Minds record that he did, there's something to that becomes the way the band sounds. Like, it's not just, oh, that's a Trevor Horn version of that band.
Well, look at Yes, the classic, was that song?
Yeah, Owner of a Lonely Heart.
Owner of a Lonely Heart. I mean, his sonic trademark was all over his records, but especially back then, piecing those records. I mean, today you can make a fucking album on your iPhone on the bus, you know, and it sounds damn good, you know, but it was not easy back then. And how he made those records, yes, he had an all-star team around him, but so does everybody else. I mean, you know, but they all don't sound great.
Yeah.
And they're all not great records. You know, because it goes back to, just because you're a great musician doesn't mean you're going to make a great record. Just because you're a sonic genius doesn't mean that you're going to make a great record. There's a lot of things that have to fall into place. And I think that his body of work speaks for itself.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not in my mind, there's absolutely no question about it. So what did you work on him with other than the Seal stuff?
Wendy and Lisa, the Toy soundtrack, which was a big movie. Random stuff,
just because, like, you know, whatever he was working on when he happened to be in LA, basically.
Yeah, because, you know, when you're independent, you're like, hey, can you work with me, or can I hire you? And you're working for weeks, and then maybe the record doesn't come out, or maybe who knows. So I mean, I do records I forget I even fucking did, you know, like, did I work with that person? Oh yeah.
Well, like the Jacksons. Did that happen?
I didn't even know I worked in a Jacksons record.
Well, I don't know. You got to, according to the internet, you did.
No, I probably did, but honestly, it's the God honest truth. I forget shit I do half the time. So.
Well, but it's also, I think, when, especially like while you're working for John Barnes or something like that, there could be 3 records in a day that you work on, because he's got to do a little something on something, and yeah. I mean, this stuff's just flowing through, but it's the same gig as far as it's just a different piece of tape.
It's a day in the life, exactly.
Yeah. Well, great.
Well, but I'm going to talk about you, because I told this to you earlier. I want to interview you on the show one day. So I'm going to put me, Mark, on the
is this going to be your little audition for interviewing me now?
Well, fans of you probably don't know that I hired you to play trumpet on one of my records.
You did. And I have a really embarrassing story about that too. So you want to talk about that record? I mean, it doesn't happen for a few years, but.
Yeah, sure. So you go.
Well, actually, there are a couple records I played trumpet for, because there was the Povi record, but then also one of the Ecova records.
Did you play on Ecova as well?
Yeah. I did. Well, so here's my embarrassing. This is an LA name drop story, like fucking crazy. So we're going to talk about Ecova on their own because what a ridiculously great band.
Yeah.
And you brought me in, and I think I did like the usual thing was I did a little programming for you and some like vocal editing or whatever, assisting, blah blah blah. And then I played some trumpet, and so then I went with Joel to a party at Alanis Morissette's house, and Nigel Godrich was there. And that's the first time I ever met him. And I fanboyed like crazy. And for some reason, I was losing my voice. So I could barely speak. And it was really loud. And I was talking to Nigel for a little bit. But then like he went off and did something else. So then when I was leaving, I thought, man, I have to go say goodbye to Nigel Godrich. Like I've been fanboying over him all night. And I went into a room. He's playing ping pong. And the Ecova record was on. And it was the track that I played trumpet on. And some garbled sentence that made absolutely no sense came out of my mouth like, hey, man, that's me playing trumpet on that thing right there. Gotta go. Great to meet you. Bye. And I left, and it was like...
So this was an Alanis party? Or
Yeah, it was...
Because I have a story about Alanis and Ecova, which you might not know.
I'm sure I don't. I
had worked with Alanis on a couple of projects.
Yeah, which we got to talk about that. But
yeah, this one record, Under the Rug Swept. And so... I was working with I don't even know. Somehow Alanis knew this Ecova record, right? And when we were working together in New York or LA, she's like, you did that record, Carmen? Fuck, I'm a huge fan. You know, we're going on. So this was when Ecova had broken up and I was in Paris. And Deirdre said, can you finish the record with me, Carmen, my solo record? I said, yeah. And I said, you know, Alanis told me she's a huge fan. Anyway, small talk. Long story short, I got Alanis for free as a favor to me to sing with Deirdre on a duet, and she never put it out.
Oh, you're joking.
Because she said, I was like, look, Deirdre, you sing the first verse, first chorus on your own. Alanis sings the second verse, then you sing the chorus together. We had this whole strategy. She came into my studio in Hollywood. She sang it, just me, Alanis, and Deirdre. And then like Deirdre says, oh, this song, you know, it's too personal to me. It's about my friend who died. I need to sing it by myself. And the record company's like, what? You've got Alanis Morissette and it didn't cost us a dime and she's willing to just do it? And Deirdre said, no, I don't want to release it. And she never released it.
Oh. Songwriters.
It was a real tragedy because she did a great job and it was a beautiful duet. So that's my story.
Wow. Well, let's talk about, I mean, we're going out of order a little bit, but who cares? Let's talk about Ecova a little bit. Because, I mean, like you talked about, you went to Paris, well, you didn't go to Paris, but you made the Khaled record, then that really opened up some doors. But you were still doing mostly American, not mainstream, but American records. And then you really started doing a lot more world records.
Yeah. And so there was an A&R guy named Mark Tonon, this is Mark, and he was the A&R guy for Khaled, and says, hey, I have this little label called Atmospherique. There's this band called Ecova. It's a guy from Iran and a guy from Algeria. And Deirdre, who's been living in Paris most of her life, but she's American, sings in this made-up language like Dead Can Dance, you know, Cocteau Twins. And they have one little EP out, and I was just, talk about fanboy. I was, oh my God. So I met them. I'll never forget. I flew to Paris for the weekend just to meet them, fell in love with them. We became friends. I made this other record. And then I just, between that and the Khaled, I just kept getting all this cool, eclectic world music. And then I drank the poison. I was like, I'm in. I could make a career out of doing ethnic music from cool parts of the world, and that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah, well, and you're still doing big stuff because I mean I'm skipping over things. Well, all right, we can't skip over these things. We got to talk about them. So first of all, and I'm pretty sure you brought me in because we both worked on this thing, the Green Day Brain Stew remix that Rob Cavallo was overseeing, but wasn't. It's just come back to me that Jack was engineering it, right?
Yeah, Jack Joseph Puig. I mean, as you know, I was getting a lot of work from Rob Cavallo, and I was doing a lot of engineering, just programming all kinds of stuff, and so that's how I met a lot of these big records. And I remember he did the Green Day, all the Green Days, all the classics. And then we needed a remix. So I think we and you did it, or I brought you in on something. And so that was Green Day, and that was fun. Yeah. And I think I did that with Chris Vrenna from Nine Inch Nails. I think he was on that with me.
Yes. I remember that. Yes, because at some point the three of us were at my place doing something, and then we went down to Record One, like to put the stuff on tape or something like that, and Jack was there.
Yeah.
Crazy.
God,
all right,
Andrew, we have so many fucking memories. It's we could
insane.
do a whole novel of books.
This part of your career, you brought me in on almost everything.
Yeah,
it's insane.
So we did so many records together. It's like Doyle Bramhall.
Well, so let's talk about the Doyle Bramhall record for a bit, because that's a fucking monster record. Doyle Bramhall,
that's a great record.
He's Doyle Bramhall the second, son of, grew up with the whole Stevie Ray Vaughan crew. His dad played with him, and like just an amazing musician. And Wendy and Lisa produced his first record, right? And this is A&R'd by Tony Berg.
Yeah, the great Tony Berg. And then I mixed the record. I think I engineered it as well, maybe. Yeah, I don't even remember. And Doyle, like, for people who don't know, Stevie Ray Vaughan's family, when he passed, kind of gave the keys to Doyle as the new Stevie Ray Vaughan. And it's just, he's a really great talent and great musician. And then talking about my eclectic career, that really introduced to me into this sort of classic rock, almost, I don't even know what you'd call that kind of record, but that kind of genre. So, and I got to get to know Tony Berg as an A&R person and as a great music maker himself. And so Andrew and I worked on that record. Yeah, and I think that's how we also got to know Chad Blake. Because he was working a lot him and Mitchell were working at Sunset Sound Factory.
Yeah, they were at Sound Factory.
My room was Studio B, his was Studio A. So when I think about my life in studios, it was like Chad Blake and me, Jack Joseph Puig and me at Studio 55, or Alan Meyerson and me at Larrabee. There were always these, I was lucky to be around these big shots. And that's how we got to know Chad, right? In Huxley.
Yeah, it must have been. And that must have been how Wendy and Lisa met him, because then, of course, he produced one of their solo records.
He's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely amazing.
He's in a league of his own.
So right around this time, so you're doing a bunch of stuff for Rob Cavallo. But all right, here's another record that we got to talk about. Fucking Freak Power.
Norman Cook, Norman Cook from Fatboy Slim.
Yeah.
So
and Ashley Slater.
And so Ashley, who's great as well, did this Freak Power record, and I forgot I did that record, and that got me a lot of English work because Fatboy Slim was fucking huge back then, and so I was going to England a lot to do, a lot of records. Yeah. That's
a fantastic record too.
Thank you. That's a good record.
It really is.
And that really introduced me to a lot of stuff that I was unaware of. All those tricks. It's like, Ashley, how did you do that? You know? Yeah. And because back then with Norman Cook, they were just chopping shit up. And
yeah. And then, I mean, sort of one of the hooks of that record is that Ashley's also a fantastic trombone player.
He's a great music maker himself. And yeah, I learned a lot from him as well.
Yeah. And then the same year as the Green Day thing, Doyle Bramhall, Freak Power, there's also the Human Nature record, which is like a totally different camp.
Yeah, which is this boy band in Australia, which they're like one of the biggest ever bands in Australia. And my dear, dear friend, Andrew Klippel, was the producer. And that was when I was going to Sydney constantly to make these great records like Rock Melons and various records. And that was just a great time of my life because I got to make all these Aussie records and experience music making. And like another great story of In Excess of working at Rhinoceros Records, it was Rhino, the studio there. And I'll never forget going to secret shows, seeing In Excess, and going to nightclubs in Bondi Beach with Michael Hutchinson. Michael Hutchins. Yeah. Hutchins. And God, what a time. For people who don't know, he was the lead singer of In Excess.
Yeah.
People don't even know who In Excess is, but they're pretty fucking big.
I think they know. Maybe. But so, I mean, if you think about it, you've got the remix thing, but it's kind of a rock remix, especially Chris Vrenna, Nine Inch Nails. This is and Green Day. You've got the rock record that's Doyle, pretty straight up rock, but actually not really, because there's a real
Like soul.
kind of soul thing going on there, which I think Wendy and Lisa really helped to bring out of him. You've got Freak Power, which is total up to the second English chopped up dance stuff. Like
breakbeat,
breakbeat stuff. You've got Human Nature, which is boy band R&B, which led to like Earth, Wind and Fire. That was another. It started with, I think, was Andrew Klippel involved in that? No, that was.
Yeah, it was actually. He was producing a.
Yeah, he was co-producing with someone, right?
Yeah, yes, this guy Alan. So that's how I met Philip Bailey from Earth, Wind and Fire. And then we went to record and make the record in Sydney, Australia. And then I became good friends with Philip. And then I ended up producing and doing some stuff for him later on. And then I did something for Maurice White because I knew Philip. And yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
And then at exactly the same time is also that Robbie Robertson record that you brought me in on.
Yeah, which I got my first Grammy nomination. Yeah. Which is when I met Marius DeVries.
Exactly, which is what we need to talk about. So it's Contact from the Underworld of Red Boy. Yeah. And it's a really different record. And it's definitely of a time. It's when drum and bass had just exploded. And
Howie B was the main producer of the record. And so Marius DeVries, who's one of my dear friends, still lives down the street, was Nelly Hooper's main sort of arsenal of like musician, keyboard player, programmer who did all the Bjork and Soul to Soul and all those classic UK.
And before that, we were talking last week with Steve Lipson, and he did all of the writing demos, which were not demos, with Annie Lennox for her first solo record.
Oh wow, that's great! Yeah,
and they kept a lot of his stuff. Yeah.
So Marius was like this badass, and so when he left, I think I met him on the Robbie record somehow, and he was just being freelance, and I was just making all these records with Marius. We did a Fiona Apple remix, and we just did all this stuff and became dear friends, and we got our Grammy nomination, the first one. My second one was with Seal and with Robbie, and then that was great because Robbie's a legend, and that introduced me to a little bit of film work because Marius then was Baz Luhrmann, the filmmaker's go-to guy for all these musicals like Romeo and Juliet, and go down the long list. So then Maz was calling me. It's like, hey, you in town next week? Yeah. It's like, I got to record Ozzy Osbourne at Capitol. Can you do it? Like, yeah, where are you? It was like, I can't go. So back then, like I'd put the phone on speakerphone in the studio and we'd be doing the session, okay, Ozzy, can you sing it this way? And then he would call me for things like other musicals he would do. And anyway, it was just, so we did a lot of work together.
Yeah, which a lot of really great work together, definitely. All right, another couple records we got to talk about right in this time. We're up to like 1998 though. We're powering through, which is amazing.
Oakenfold, is he going to bring Oakenfold?
Well, we're not quite there, are we? But I mean he's a couple years later, but we can talk about him right now if you want.
Well, that was a big part of my career, was working with Paul Oakenfold, because I got a chance to really get into the dance world at the top because he was big, and I got to work with Andy Gray, who of course, who's fucking brilliant, and he was kind of the main arch of Paul, great British producer, programmer guy, and I learned a lot from Andy. And that record was great because when I think about that, we were working, these guys that were coming to my studio were like, Billy Corben from Smashing Pumpkins and Tricky, and oh my God, I can't remember. Everyone was working on that, was singing or guesting on that Oakenfold record, and we were working with them. And that got me, that allowed me to enter into the dance world. And that's when I got to meet all the heavy hitters as a producer and a co-writer, because I was also writing on that. And that parlayed me into Coldplay because of Dave Holmes.
Right.
If you're going to fast forward.
Yeah, that's fast forwarding a lot, but Yeah, the progression is there. So when did you set up your own room? When did that happen?
I was one of the first people that I knew that had my own studio, and that was above my garage when I owned that house in Los Feliz. And like Terrence Trent D'Arby was coming by my house. And then I was like, where's Terrence? And he's upstairs with my wife at the time, hanging out, having coffee. And I was just like, okay, I need a space, like people, like artists were, up in my house, and it was cool. But then I was like, maybe I need a studio. So then I was one of and you can vouch for this, Andrew.
Yeah.
And I'm not patting myself on the back, but I was one of the first people that I knew in Los Angeles that had their own project studio back then. And so there was this place on Hollywood and Cahuenga, and I got this little room that I expanded over years. And then out of nowhere, every fucking musician, producer, hey man, I don't know you, but I hear you got a room up there. Can I get in? And all of a sudden, Glenn Ballard's calling me, Dave Stewart's calling me. And at one point I had 50% of that building with just my mates, and it was like a music mecca.
Yeah.
And I felt good about that, because I felt like I started this revolution. Because back then, if you were some rich dude and you owned a home, you were trying to get a studio in your garage, but nobody had, we were just some fucking kids like, yo, it's cheap rent. Come on over. And I was hooking people up. Yeah.
The ground floor used to be a bank, or actually it still was a bank at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, I don't think it was. It was a shithole kind of, the whole building, but it was great. It was great because I helped a movement. And then Katie Lang had a place across the street.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's such a great time period.
Yeah, it really was a hotbed. There were so many people in that building. It was amazing.
It was
yeah. Not the best soundproofing, I seem to remember.
Oh no, it was the Wild West. It was parties on the roofs, no sound. It was like whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was great. We made tons of records up there. But you brought up Glenn Ballard because obviously he's also part of. Was he? Did you meet Alanis through him, or had you worked with her elsewhere? Like, how did that all come about?
I don't remember how I met Glenn.
Because Glenn was another euphonics guy too, which that didn't hurt.
He was a euphonics guy, but one of my best friends and my agent at William Morris was Amos Newman, and Amos and I want to say I met Glenn because of Amos, because Amos, I've known him from the very beginning of his career when he was an A&R guy at Elektra, and then he was at a crossroads of his career before he became the huge agent as he is now, and partner at William Morris. He was an A&R guy for Glenn's label Java, and they had hired me to produce or to work with Terrence Trent D'Arby, and then Glenn and I became friends, and then I was working with Glenn on various things, and maybe I met him. Maybe that's how I met Alanis, because I originally met Alanis through Rob Cavallo, because I'll never forget, Rob came over to my house and we did the demo for Uninvited for Alanis Morissette with those 3 notes. And we just sat in my little room, and with Mitty, we knocked out, he's like, she came to me with these 3 notes, da-na-na-na, or whatever it was. And we started that song on Uninvited for that big movie soundtrack.
Yeah.
And I think that's when Alanis and I worked together and became friends. And I from there, worked on her record.
Right.
I think.
We'll say that's how it happened. Why not? Yeah. Why not? So, all right, look, another record from that same era is the PJ Olson record that you did.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, you want to talk about it a little bit? Because it's great, and it's really weird also because it sort of came out again.
Well, that's a really sore subject, that record for me, but I'll just say it because that was a record. That was the first time, Andrew, that my heart was broken in a record, because prior to that, you form relationships and you have clients, and people are repeat clients, and everyone's work for hire at the end of the day. But in your career, you look back and you say, oh, I did X amount of records with this person. But that was the time where I was really discovering new talent. And because I know a lot of people, I was meeting a lot of people. And even to this day, I feel I have a good ear for discovering talent. And so through someone, I found PJ Olson, this incredibly raw talent, superstar in the sense of he was Beck in that era. If you know Beck, if you're a fan of Beck, and you know when Beck did his first song of Loser, his first hit with the Dust Brothers, which did a fantastic job of, that was the beginning, in my opinion, of producers were the artists almost, where the Dust Brothers with Beck made a record where the producers, in my opinion, at least in that time, were a real intricate part of the artist and the album.
Yeah.
Beck now is a different story. You know, they were finding these records and sampling and the art of sampling, right? Okay. So PJ was a verbatim Beck, you know, he played guitar. It was almost identical. It was almost too close. I was producing this record, you know, I brought you in on it. We brought in everybody. We made this great record. But back then it was difficult to put music out on your own. You needed a label. And that was when Columbia Records, Tim Devine found it, signed it, took credit, convinced him to not use me. And that was the first time it broke my heart, where it was my baby because I put so much effort into this record. And I really helped develop him. And PJ's great. I love PJ. There's no hard feelings. He had a great career. Not a great career as a recording artist, unfortunately, but had a great career working with Alan Parsons. Yeah. And I have nothing but love and respect for PJ. But at that time, it was really heartbreaking for me because he convinced him to make the record on his own and with other people, and I wasn't participating. And I was like, what do you mean? So that was when I realized, okay, I've got to have tough skin because that hurt. Right. But that was the nature of A&R people not discovering talent. They would wait for someone to find it, develop it, and then sign it, write a check, and convince them to move on, which was very disappointing. Right. Right. You probably witnessed that, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No question. With Subbionic, which we did some of that at Glenn Boward's place, and Joel played on that, and yeah, absolutely, same thing.
I mean, look, it's the casualty of war. It's part of it.
But the only reason I really wanted to bring that record up is because it's not that well known, and then it took a while for the label version of that record to come out. But like the song Visine is completely unchanged from the version you did. It's exactly the same. And the reason I want to mention is because people need to look at that in the context of Beck and the whole trip hop scene and realize that you were as early as anybody to that. You weren't reacting to Beck. You were just doing the same stuff.
Yeah. No, thank you for taking notice, because I think there's a lot of records that, whatever the genre is, come out and you think that they're cutting edge, breaking barriers, but there often are records that are just don't get noticed, unfortunately. And, you know, whatever the genre is. And, you know, from the grace of God, some records find their way through and good for them. And, you know, there's been so many parts of my career that I could go back and say, God damn, like Sarah Bareilles. I discovered Sarah on a talent contest. I had paperwork. We worked countlessly. We did demos. I took her around. I couldn't get her arrested, man. No publisher, no manager, no label wanted nothing to do with her. And I gave up. I was like, look, Sarah, I don't know what to do, man. Nobody wants to have anything to do with you. I mean, not verbatim, but almost literally. And then years went by. She's a huge superstar, and I'm so happy for her. But what are you going to do? Yeah. Nobody wanted to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens all the time. But I think that like there's a great, it's on YouTube of PJ playing Visine on Letterman or something like that. And so people want to see what else was going on in that scene early on. It's worth seeing. Yeah. And you were a huge part of that record. I mean, because look, I think one thing about you as a producer and a programmer is the records you make are eclectic and they're all over the place, but there is no mistaking a Carmen Rizzo groove. Like it's a thing, and it's amazing how different it can be. But your thumbprint is all over that record.
No, thank you. I mean, I really took pride on coming up with something different, you know, the art of programming, the art of instrumentation. That's something I pride myself on. It's so easy in today's record making. It's a little smoke and mirrors, you know, we're all guilty of that. But I think back then, that was when you really had to make an imprint of what you do. Like I tell people, you know, okay, bass. What kind of bass? Is it real bass? Is it bass synth? Is it 5-string? Is it 4-string? Is it round wound? Is it flat wound strings? Little things that make a difference, you know, and it can make a big difference. And that's something in my records that I take pride in, is the instrumentation. Mm-hmm. Sure, there's a fucking piano on every song, it seems like, but is it a Fender Rhodes? Is it a Wurlitzer? Is it a piano? Is it an upright? Go down the long list. I know it sounds pedestrian, but combined, it's no different than fashion. You know, we all wear similar styles and clothes, but how you mix and match clothing creates style.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's like saying, you know, oh, I'm going to program some drums, so I'll just use a kick. Like, exactly. There are 50 million kick drum samples, but your MPC library that you carried with you, that was a thing.
I took great pride in that, because you had to know the art of sampling and how to always be ahead of the curve, because music is no different than fashion. You know, sounds are fashionable, techniques are fashionable, but I would always try to challenge myself and do something a little bit different that hopefully, you know, made a stamp on when you heard a record. Because back then, how we would listen to records, you would hear it on radio. It was the only source. And you wanted to like time your, you know, they're going to play this single on the radio at this time. Like, you wanted to pull over your car and like, holy shit, this record stands out. You know, it's just different these days. I mean, I know I hate to be that guy that sounds that way, but I mean, I still hear brilliant cutting edge records that motivate me and inspire me, but you sometimes have to search for it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Because everything comes out all the time.
Because I think, and I was going to save this for the end, but there's something about being fearless that you should hopefully retain as you go on with your career. But when you're young, you're fearless.
Well, now look, this is something I was going to save to the end, because that is, in my mind, watching you work and watching you make these records, that is an adjective I would absolutely use to describe you at all times. I mean, and one of the reasons is because, like, the next year after the records we're talking about, and there's one I still want to go back to for a second, you decide to become an artist with Povi.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so you dive into programming, you'll work in any genre, you'll like whatever, and you are absolutely fearless with doing it. And you just, like, yes, I'm producing this. Yep, I'm doing all the programming. Yeah, I'm playing keyboards. Yeah, I'm an artist.
Thank you for saying that, because that's a really good compliment. So I appreciate that. I mean, I remember my first artist deal on Network was I said to myself, I'm doing all this work for other artists. How can I get work as a producer? And I'm like, let me make an artist record. I don't want to be a star. I don't even want to make money on it. I just want people to notice my work and then hire me. So that was when Povi. So I met this girl from Australia, from Australia, you know, Chris Starr, and we did some demos. You were in on that, and Network signed it, and that was when I was all of a sudden an artist, and I was like, "Whoa, okay, this was like 1990 or 91 or whatever year it was."
Yeah, the album came out in. No, it was later than that. I think
92 or something.
Well, the album came out in 99, didn't it?
Oh, you know, you're right. Jeez,
yeah.
I was thinking late of 80,
end
of 99. Sorry, you're right. I apologize. You're right about that. But that was when I got to know the Network crew, which was Dave Holmes. And Dave Holmes then was really influential. Like, you need to do that, because he was managing me during the Oakenfold record. And he was that was easing him into the Coldplay. And that was when he's like, you got to do this for yourself. And so I listened to him. Yeah,
which is amazing, because it's, I think, like, for me, the imposter syndrome is so deep that, like, I could never think, like, oh, I can't do that, you know. my input is never enough to do that. And I just love that you did it and made some amazing records. I mean, we'll talk about them because it's not just
but it
Povi.
wasn't vanity based though. It wasn't vanity based at all. It was more like, just hire me. I just want to get work. I want to make a living.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty badass way to do it.
Well, thanks.
And I do have to say that I think it was the first Povi record, I did some whammy pedal trumpet stuff that's I still enjoy to this day. That's like one of the few things I can say like that was badass. But I want to talk about another record because it was another guy from kind of the crew, was the Bill Rieflin record.
May he rest in peace.
Yes.
Didn't know if he passed. Bill Rieflin was the drummer for Ministry and Pigface and REM towards the end. And he was industrial music. And I really loved that record because that introduced me to industrial music, like Chris Connolly and other people. And that was great. I loved working with Bill, and he unfortunately passed, I think, a couple of years ago with cancer.
Right.
And his wife as well. Ugh.
So how did that record come about?
It was Chris Bruce, because he was friends with, Al Jorgensen and all that whole Ministry, Wax Trax crew. And I had never done a record like that, but I got schooled real quick, and it was great. So again, like I went from world music to these R&B boy band, and now I'm like fucking Ministry record, welcome to the real world.
It's amazing, but always fit right in. I mean, I don't think you ever came out of one of those thinking, well, I've managed to survive. You came out of one of those thinking like, yeah, okay, look, now we can do that.
No, then it was like, let's do. Yeah, I mean, I forgot about that record because then Chris Connolly record, and then, those are fun records though. It was aggressive music and beautiful music as well.
We should talk about Chris Bruce just for a second. First of all, because he's just such a badass. But second of all, because he's been working on a solo record for like 40 years now. Has it come out? Has he ever put it out? I just remember.
No, he's
man.
Two of the biggest, I would say the four biggest influential musicians in my whole life, not in any order, would be Chris Bruce and Jimmy Mahobrak and Wendy and Lisa. Not only did I learn so much from them, they're the best four musicians I've ever worked with. And I've worked with a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember Chris playing us, I think it was while you were mixing Doyle's record or something, and he played us a couple of tracks that he'd been working on.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I love him dearly.
Well, people need to go do a little Google search, Chris Bruce, because he's played on lots of people's records, including all of the My Brightest Diamond
kind of
stuff.
The musical director and main source with Michelle Indigiocello. He writes and produces and works with her, and who's another incredible artist that we're also good friends.
Yeah. So, and this is all, part of your crew.
Yeah.
And your crew thanks you.
I'm the lucky one.
All right. What do you want to talk about? Eve Adam or Supreme Beings of Leisure?
Do we need to go to every record? Gee, we'll be here all fucking night.
But they're all great, and they're all different.
I mean, we could paraphrase. I mean, I think there's records in my career that I think are bridges to other things, like, Adam and Eve, or no, Supreme Being of Leisure was the whole bittersweet, crew with Shauna, and again, being a part of a scene, they were a very part of this sort of local West Side Los Angeles scene that I'm just grateful that I was a part of, because I think if you're a fan of anyone's work, I mean, sure, anybody can live in, like, I don't know where, and they hire somebody, but that's a little bit more work for hire. But when you're a part of an evolving scene, I feel proud of that. Kind of going back to my early days, with the Chili Peppers and Fishbone, like, you feel you're part of a movement. And I think Supreme Being of Leisure is a part of a movement that I was fortunate to be a part of here. So yeah.
Yeah, and not just along for the ride. I mean, we talked about the trip hop scene, talk about them, talk about all the other stuff you were doing. You were the scene. You weren't just along for the ride, like, oh yeah, I'm hanging out with the people who were doing it. You were doing it.
Well, and that kind of brings up the trip hop. Like when I made my first solo record, and I was like, I want to work with this band called Alpha, and they were from Bristol, which is where Portishead's from, which is where Massive Attack's from. And I fucking was like, I'm coming out there, man. I don't know you guys. You don't know me. Everybody's talking about Massive Attack and Portishead, but you're on Melancholic Records, which is Massive Attack's label. I want to work with you. So we were like, okay. So I went out to the fucking woods, and there's like sheep and cows, and I stayed in a caravan.
Welcome to my world. Yeah.
Your world. And we're making music out there. And it was great because I was a part of that trip hop scene. And that was when we did that Estero track. And Alpha's as good as Massive Attack and fucking Port. You know, they're in the same. You should bring up them when you bring up those two bands. But I'd like to think I was ahead of that curve because like nobody knew where fucking like Bristol was. You know, if you didn't work from London, you know, from England.
Right. Right. Which of course in Bristol's got an amazing music scene all its own. Well, several amazing music scenes, but yeah.
It's the birth of trip hop.
Yeah. 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 It's pretty astounding. So, all right, look, you want me to, I can skip over a couple, well, I can't really skip over that much stuff. You already mentioned Terence Trent D'Arby, so we don't have to go back to him, but Grant Lee Phillips.
I would put him in my short list of one of my favorite records I've ever made.
Yeah, so you got to tell the long version of this one then.
Well, Grant was in Grant Lee Buffalo, and when he wanted to make this record with me, I was like, you're kidding, why me, you know? And he wanted to go away from the sort of campfire sound and band sound, and he wanted to be really electronic. So, and he's very shy, very soft-spoken, doesn't say a lot of words. And we went into my studio in Hollywood, and we just locked ourselves away for 6 weeks. And it was just me and him doing everything. And it was one of my favorite records I've ever made, and one of the most talented people I've ever worked with, because he plays every instrument. He sings, he writes, and just an absolute gem of a human being.
Well, I mean, I remember because, I mean, at that time, we were probably talking 3 or 4 times a week at least. I mean, it's probably every day, actually. And you were so excited about that record from day one. But it was also one of the few records where you're like, man, I might be able to bring in on something, but I don't know. It's just we're kind of locking the doors and hunkering down.
Everything. We were working so fast. He was like, boom, 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 boom. He would do a part. I would do a part. It didn't matter, and it was done. And there were some great songs on that record. It's just he's really good. So yeah, that's one of my favorite records.
Yeah, and I still remember how excited you were during and after. You know.
Oh, thank you.
Just to been doing it. That wasn't the long version, by the way. That was still sort of the short version. You're not getting this, man.
I don't even feel right being on your show, man.
We got 4 more hours to fill, man.
Well, at some point, I got to pee. I got to take a break.
I know. I'm joking. I'm just joking. But all right, look. At the same time, it's just insane. Like, it's just the list of people, because we're skipping over Terence Trent D'Arby because we already mentioned him, so we don't have to talk about him. But there's Tiesto is in there. Perry Farrell.
That was great fun too. Perry was fun to work with. I forget what I did with him. We just became friends. We did. What did I do? Oh, on his record. That's right.
Yeah.
Worked on his record, and it was fun. And he's a great guy. And every time I think of Perry, I think of him meeting his wife. I was with him when he met his wife, for some reason. Anyway, he's a great guy. I love him. Love Perry.
And I mean, it's weird because like a lot of people get not pigeonholed necessarily, but it's sort of like, okay, this is what that person does, where you don't have that at all. And then other people have, like what you were talking about before, being part of a scene where it's like, okay, they are like, oh, there's the Silver Lake crowd, and so they do all those records or whatever. You don't have that either, but you are part of all of these scenes at the same time.
I like to, I'm a connector. I love to connect people, and I love to have relationships with people, business and pleasure. And I really pride myself on this, Andrew. Like every day, if you knew who I'm calling or texting or emailing, I look at my life as like a forest, and I'm seeding it, and I'm planting So I keep in touch with people in Sarajevo, in Kazakhstan, in Europe, and Israel and Palestine, and go down the list. And they're business colleagues or collaborators that I just stay in touch with. So I don't want to be pigeonholed. You know, I can flex around anybody. I can say, hey, I was on a fucking Michael Jackson record, or I can say, I played in Siberia with this person, or I played in a festival in this country. I want to be able to say that elegantly and not selfishly, or not like I'm bragging, because I feel like someone like Farrell, I consider kind of a friend. Hopefully, he doesn't need to call me for work again. I hope that someone like that can say, I want to make a record like this. Do you know anybody? And a lot of people would want that gig. And I'd say, I can hook you up with this person. Because, you know, and maybe I'm saving this for the Q&A, but what people need to realize about their career, and this is the part that I don't like about the film composing world, is that you should have the courage to say to the client or to whoever's calling you that I'm not the right person for you. I saw a friend of mine yesterday by fluke. Wonderful. I ran into a friend, wonderful jazz artist. And she was looking for a producer. I hooked her up with a friend of mine. I could have maybe manipulated my way for the gig, but I was the wrong person. Why would I do that?
Right.
And you should be able to say to somebody, I'm not the right person for you, because what you don't want is to get fired or find yourself in a position that you're not the right person. And the problem with film work, which I've been fortunate to do a few films and compose a few films, and I'm generalizing in this statement, but so many of those people, they're friends with a director, or that's their client. And they're like, I need a country score, or I need a Middle Eastern score, or I can do it. I can do it. And they farm it out, which sure, you can do that, but they're so worried about losing that client, they're just going to take the gig. But I've always would pride myself in saying, I might not be the right person for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But you are the right person for a ridiculously eclectic group of people, but it's because you know when you're the right person for the gig.
Well, that's my point, is if you put yourself in that position and you're interviewing for a gig or you're talking to somebody, if I feel confident, like I know exactly what you want to do, and I really feel I can help you do that, I'd love to do this with you. And that's when it comes down to not money, but I really feel I'm the right person for you. But if I'm not, I'll tell you.
And I think maybe this feeds into your ability to be as fearless as you are, is because you don't put yourself into situations you're going to fail in. So why wouldn't you be fearless?
I try. I mean, sure, I've gotten fired off projects before in my life. All of us have. And sometimes it's not for any reason other than it didn't work out, you know?
Yeah.
It didn't work out, or this is not going as well, you know? That's fair. But at least if you come in a little bit fearless and saying, I really do think I'm the right person, then hopefully it'll work out.
Yeah. And when it doesn't, it's not, you don't need to bluster and take over and make sure you stay there. You go, because it's not the right thing. Well, yeah,
because look, at the end of the day, emotion gets in the way always. And even if you don't get the gig,
mm-hmm.
It might not be because of any other reason of that someone else better got it. It doesn't mean I'm not good, or, you know, it's just what it is.
Right. All right, we got more records to talk about. You ready?
All right. Are you sure? I mean, is there anyone even fucking listening?
Yes. Yeah, look, man, if everybody had tuned out, Mark would have told us. I'm telling you, this is...
Mark, just let us know if there's
This is fascinating. The more in depth you are, the more fascinating it is. I'm swear to you. Because, look, all right, so the next year we're talking about some film stuff. So Michael Nyman,
that was a great highlight because I got to work at Abbey Road.
Mark says, tons of people, everyone is loving it. All right?
Dear. I don't want to waste everyone's time, but
you're not. There's nothing you can do to waste their time except to not talk about stuff.
All right. I don't feel I'm worthy, but thank you for listening.
It is fascinating.
Michael Nyman was great because another world music project, because there was a really eclectic A&R person in Germany who found me on Warner Classic, who said, "Would you be interested in working with Michael Nyman?" And of course, and he's a very eclectic person. And we worked with these wonderful Indian singers from Rajasthan. I can't remember where they were from in India, actually. And then I got to work in Abbey Road in Studio 2. So that was really fun. And that was also fun because I spent a lot of time in London, of course, working with Seal in the 90s. And then Michael lived in Islington, which back then was like, ooh, you don't want to go to Islington. And that was fun back then because it was a little bit off the grid. Now it's a bit bougie, isn't it?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. A little pricey over there.
Yeah, but back then it was like the blue collar town. But he had this fly place, and I was staying in Islington, and it was really fun. I remember.
Right. All right. Great. We got Beth Nielsen Chapman around that time, which.
Yeah, that was good because Beth's amazing. And that allowed me to work with David Foster, where I got to produce a track with David Foster, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I got to say I produced a song with David Foster. There's a credit somewhere. It says that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That was cool.
So how'd that happen? I mean, like, again, this seems like out of left field, but
well,
why
I was
not?
producing Beth, and we were making music, and there was a song that she wrote with Andy Roboff, who's a huge songwriter, and there was for a movie, and David was doing the soundtrack or something, and somehow it was like, David wants to produce this with you, or you have to produce it with David or something. Like, okay. So we went in the studio and did it. It was fun.
Now, is that the one that we were mixing at Record Plant when Humberto just happened to stop by to work out the vocal reverb?
Yeah, it's all over. Those two motherfuckers, there's such a political thing in that thing. I'm going to stay out of that shit. It was like politics 101.
Yeah, that was funny. I couldn't remember what project that was, but yeah, so we were mixing, and I think we had some really crazy like chorus delay effect on the background vocals, and David was not digging it, but like,
well, because they make purist records.
Yeah,
and
but then Humberto just happened to stop by and call up a reverb program for us, which is awesome. I love that. Yeah,
like fuck off. We're here trying to do some cool shit. No disrespect to those guys, but like we were making very different records.
It's funny, man.
They make very traditional kind of records, and we weren't. So
I just think it's really funny. That's definitely an East meets West situation, sort of thing. All right, so a not David Foster record at the same time was the Sheila Nichols record.
I forgot about that record. I don't even know what to say because I forgot about that record. God, so fast forward.
Okay, but so the only reason I want to bring that one up is because that's, I believe, where I met Jez Collin, who was working on that record as well. Yeah. And then I ended up doing a bunch of stuff with him, but I think you guys were both working on that record, like on different songs or something. I don't remember exactly what the situation was.
I recently saw Jez, who's a great guy.
Yeah.
And that's right. God, it was a long time ago. There's so many records I forgot I did, man. I don't even.
All right, well, look, here too, we're up to 2003. Just so you know, we're getting there. But here too, you can't even pretend that you've forgotten about this. So we'll start easy. Phil Collins.
There's a gold record, a platinum record right there. Yeah, so that was another surreal fucking, like the Michael Jackson thing. Rob Cavallo, we're at Conway, I think it was Conway Studios, and we're doing this Tarzan soundtrack that Phil's doing, and Rob's producing the songs. And then we needed drum program, and Kim Bullard, who had a lot to do with that as well. I can't take all the credit. And I'm programming with Phil Collins on this song, and it just was like, you're a fucking Phil Collins. What the fuck am I doing behind this like drum machine? And then Kim Bullard, who I've known forever, did also great work. That was weird, I have to say. He's Phil Collins. I mean, what do you say,
Yeah. Well, you say yes and thank you and all right.
And it was kind of cool. Yeah. It was fun. I forgot about that.
All right. Lily Hayden. You can't forget about that one.
Lily's sweetheart. Yeah. We did a lot of work. Not a lot, but enough. I produced something on her, and she's a great artist herself. Wonderful woman. I think didn't you play on that too?
I don't know if I played on it. I know that I came in and helped on that record. I don't think I played though.
Okay. Yeah, you were part of it, I think, somehow.
Yeah. That's it. That's all we're gonna. Come on, man. That's fine.
She's great. I love Lily. I mean, I don't know what to say about her. She really there was one point. Yeah, well, I'm gonna hold back.
All right, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's
No,
fine.
I said something to her that made her cry once, and I never, and I always remember that I said something and she was very sensitive. It was about the session, like, maybe do this part different. And it was around the time that her mom died, and she was really sensitive for obvious reasons. And I remember I made her cry, not like yelled at her or anything. I just maybe said something in a way that she took it the wrong way. And I'll never forgive myself, because I would never want to make anyone cry. It wasn't like something bad, like,
Yeah. But
it just made me feel bad. Like, did I make you cry? I'm really sorry,
wow. Well, I'm sorry to have brought that up then.
No, but I'm sensitive that way,
Yeah. Look, I mean, I've said this before, where I can remember every time I failed in public since I was 4 years old. Like that, I will relive that stuff forever. And that's the kind of thing where it's like, did that happen? Why did that happen? But
I think it was something like that. It was something like, are you sure you should sing on this section? That's what it was. And then she just took it the wrong way.
Right.
Because she was a soloist at the time, but she wanted to sing on the record, and it was fine. But there was this one section. I was like, you sure you want to sing on this and not be an instrumental section? And then I remembered she cried.
Right. Because instead of it being just a conversation, it was an indictment of her singing or whatever. And for people who don't know, she is one of the Hayden sisters, who are the daughters of Charlie Hayden, the amazing bass player who passed away 3 years ago now. Is it that long ago?
Maybe more. Yeah.
Super, super talented. Just ridiculously talented, all of them. All right, look, 2005, big year. We got to go through a few records here, because you want to start with Coldplay? Yeah. Let's talk about Coldplay, and this is not a 2-sentence answer here. So let's get the whole story.
Coldplay was Dave Holmes at the time, who was my manager, was Coldplay's manager at the time, and he called me. He was like, you want to work on this Coldplay record, on this song, Speed of Sound? And then, really? So then Chris came to my studio, and we worked during the week on and off. And I remember I brought you in on somehow to do something, edit or something, or upload it.
Yeah. I think it was
I know what it was. Oh,
what I do.
You helped me get it to mastering. I think what it was, if I remember right, because, okay, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically I worked with Chris. We pieced together the song. We worked on it, whatever the fuck I did. And then I went to Winter Music Conference, and I'm in Miami partying. And then they're emailing me about the track.
Oh,
and
yes.
I was like, I had no Wi-Fi. I'm like, Andrew, they need the song. I'm at like a fucking day party. Can I fucking find a way to send it to you and do this, and then send it to fucking...
I think it was even worse than that. I had to go into your studio, turn everything on, find the thing, and like print a version of it, which was like...
It to something.
God, I'd forgotten about that.
Andrew, you need to help me. I'm by the pool. So that... and then the classic story, which isn't even the record, which is, oh God, is the remix I did. That was the first time I got scared with a label. So we finished the record. The record came out. Record's a big success. This is Coldplay's height. They want remixes. So they say, hey, Carmen, you have the files. Can you farm it out to these people? I'll do a remix myself as well. So everybody's doing these club mixes. I do this half-tempo, trip-hop, down-tempo mix. It's really good. Some of my best work, in my opinion. And I give it to Jason Bentley, who's one of my best friends, who's KCRW, K-Rock.
Yeah, very influential guy in the LA music scene. And now the entire world music scene, basically.
And so Jason's like, yo, I'm the only one who has this? This is the fucking shit. So all of a sudden, he plays it on KCRW. He plays it on K-Rock. People are fucking finding my fucking number. Where can I get this mixed? I was like, oh my God, what has happened? And then Dave got really pissed off because the label was like, this is an unauthorized copy. And I had to shut it down. And it was a fucking nightmare. But to this day, it's up on SoundCloud. I got to put it out. But like people swear by this mix because it's totally like, I mean, I think it's better than the original, in my opinion. It's really good. If you want to search on my SoundCloud, look for Speed of Sound, my remix. It's really good.
Nice. Nice. And because if you had just sort of given it to the label, it would have just been buried. No one would have heard it.
Who knows? Because they wanted club mixes. And I was like, what is this like 65 BPM down tempo version? But it's really good. Just saying.
Well, people will be listening. They will be listening. So, all right, we got a lot of stuff this particular year. There's more Seal. We don't have to talk about that. Sinead O'Connor.
I did a remix with Reese, who had a project called Conjure One, and Sinead was a guest of it. And it's good. That also is really good.
See?
Yeah.
See, it's
I mean,
really
there's some stuff I'm proud of that I think is good.
It's like you're surprising yourself here. All right, we got 3 other things that happened that year, which are all fucking huge. So first of all, Cirque du Soleil.
I did a lot of work with Cirque, and that was really fun.
And that's kind of when it started. So you got to talk about the whole everything to do with that, like what you were doing. It was just fun
doing a lot of world music and the Cirque musicians coming in, and I was going out there and doing a lot of work. Yeah, it was great. I mean, that was the height of Cirque du Soleil, and it was just, again, more world music and this hybrid, and I was really enjoying it, and I loved it. I really loved it back then. Yeah.
And which shows did you work on with them?
The first one, I think, was Humanity.
Right.
Which was fun. Yeah. Which was really good. Yeah. It was good. Yeah. Those are the golden days with me.
And was that the first, did you work in the venues for the actual installed version of it as well, or do you just work on the music?
No, they would come out, they would bring in musicians, and then I'm trying to remember. There was a lot of stuff I did that didn't come out. Like we were developing a lot of stuff.
Right.
I remember, but it was good. There was a good time, and I got to go to the Cirque headquarters, I think, and in Montreal, and yeah, it was fun.
All right. Well, then this year also you put out your first solo record under your own name.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal. So, but also the first Niyaz record came out that year.
That was a good time for me because I was doing my solo work, and then I met Azam Ali and we did the Niyaz work. And that really was the pivotal time of my world music career because I co-founded Niyaz and we did a lot of wonderful music together until the band broke up. And then I just did countless other world music records since then. But I'm very proud of my Niyaz work because I learned a lot from Azam and Ramin, and it really helped put me on the map because I will definitely take credit, the 3 of us, of being a bridge of opening the door for a lot of tasteful hybrid world music records. There was a lot of bad, cheesy, new age kind of fucking music going on that was like new agey world music, but it was fucking crap. Sorry.
Yeah.
Most of it, not all of it, but a lot of it. And we brought incredible musicianship and electronics and it was cutting edge at the time. And I'm very proud of those records. So the 3 of us can stand tall on paving the road for others.
Yeah. Well, and for people who don't know, Niyaz, Niyaz or Z, 3 records?
There's many records. We did 3 or 4 records. Yeah, 3 main records. We did some acoustic records, some remix records, but 3 over 10 years. And we toured the world countless times. Very good records, all 3 of them. Very proud of all of them.
Yeah, really great. And I think what it is that it's you talk about the fact that there were these sort of new agey world records, but there were also the other side of it where someone would just put a 4 on the floor kick going and then have world stuff playing over the top.
Well, or no, they were sampling. They were just like doing some cheesy fucking beat and just sampling some cool thing, and then looping it. It just wasn't. It served its purpose, but it wasn't authentic, right?
Yeah.
So now here we are, 3 musicians singing in different languages, Farsi, Urdu, Arabic, Turkish, using different instruments. There was no sampling it was all real. I mean, I was doing all the programming and stuff as well, but it was real and we were performing it real. So, but it had electronics and it would just pave the road.
Yeah, definitely huge. And also on the first record, I may have this wrong, but aren't all of the lyrics traditional poetry that she wrote melodies for?
A lot of it's public domain, like Rumi poetry, and us creating songs from scratch, the music part, but the lyrics and stuff, yes.
Yeah, so it's a really deep project. And I think like the way I always thought about it listening to those records is the electronics were not an add-on. You wouldn't have the record without them.
I mean, I'm really so proud of those records. And I have to make it clear that it was a collective of the three of us. Every element that they brought complemented what I did, and what I did complemented, what they did. But you take any one of those elements out, it's, you put my stuff on its own, it's not as good. You put their stuff on their own, it's not as good. But together, it was magic.
Yeah,
it really was magic. And I'm very proud of those records. It was, yeah.
So when did you start your label?
Right around that time, because right around 2005 on my first record, because I was lucky to get my own label deal with Apple, which is, I'll probably be the only person you'll ever meet that has their own direct deal with Apple.
Yeah. So it's Electrophone Records. So explain what it even means to have a direct deal with Apple.
So right now, anybody can put music out, but you got to go through like TuneCore or the countless aggregators that you swim around a lot to go there. You have to share revenue. You have no control. You just, So back then, my first record deal was my friend Len Fico signed me through his little label through Universal. And he put my first record out. But at the time, Apple just started iTunes and they weren't giving independent labels a very good deal.
Right.
So a lot of the indies were like, fuck Apple. We don't want to participate in this download streaming bullshit. This is them, So we're not going to do it. So I said, Len, if I can find a way to Apple, can I have my rights back? He goes, hell yeah. Fuck Apple. This is them talking. So KCRW was playing my music so much. I called up my friend, or I somehow got, I won't say his name, through Apple. And I was like, hey, this is who I am. I'm on this label called Electrophone, which at the time I was the only artist. I won a label deal on Apple and they needed indie labels that would play ball with them. And he's like, I know who you are. I hear your music all the time on KCRW. We'd love to have you. Boom. I have a label deal with Apple. And now my label formed. I've got countless artists. It's a real label. But I was very lucky.
Yeah.
They don't do those anymore.
I mean, how many labels were there? Not many, right?
Not many. No, because how many independents are left? Not many. So at the time, they were only doing deals with the majors. And the labels who wanted to get on board, they had a bad split. So the labels were like, boycott Apple back then. So I was lucky. So that was when I had my label deal, yeah.
Right. And it's still going to this day. So it's all your records, and you've got a lot of really great artists on there. We'll talk about some more as we get through here. But so then there are a couple other film things. You work with James Newton Howard.
I guess I did. I don't remember that. I guess I did. I don't remember. I have to be honest.
Maybe that's like a soundtrack thing or a programming thing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't remember that. But I did a lot of film stuff, yeah.
All right. So there's the Kate Havnovic record.
Yes. Yeah. Kate was a guest star on my records, and I got to get to know her really well and do a lot of work with her. It was brilliant artist from Norway.
Right. So that's all right. We've got nothing more on that one. Neil Gaiman. It's all a haze, isn't it?
It's all, God, honestly, Andrew, I'm showing how fucking.
Well, no, because I think what's interesting is, I mean, like, you continued making records during this whole time, but you are an artist in your own right. You're in Niyaz and you're touring. Like you're not touring like doing club tours of the West Coast. You're going to India to play festivals.
Yeah, like I mean, again, I sound pathetic, but like it's a machine, you know, like we're touring, we're playing in like, you know, Delhi, and then I'm coming back and doing a session, and then, you know, I do another like Huun-Huur-Tu. We're playing Hollywood Bowl, opening up for Flying Lotus, and then I'm on a session. Like it's just a day in the life. I know that sounds so fucking
No, no,
like I'm
no. But
some
look, you
poser.
can't skip by Huun-Huur-Tu like that, though. We're gonna talk about Huun-Huur-Tu
Okay.
because we have to. So
When do we get a pee break? I got to pee at some
we'll
point.
go right now.
Well, let's do one more
No,
segment,
no,
else I
no,
got to
no,
flash
no.
the
Go right
keyboard.
now because I need you settled in for Huun-Huur-Tu.
All right, I'm going to stop my video and take a quick
All
pee. I'll be
right,
right back.
that's good. I always show them like I got a toothpick this week.
All right, you talk, you talk.
All right, I'm going to show them my toothpick. I don't think I got anything else that exciting. I got my tape measure again. I can measure stuff. Like if I measure what you can see of me, that's you want it in centimeters or inches? It's like 6 3/4 inches, so 16.5 centimeters. When my arms are there, that's how much you can see. That's pretty exciting, right? I can do a plug for something. Did I mention this before? This thing? Two plugs. Okay. My video is not reversed, so you're not going to be able to read this, but the light pedal. Holy shit. Spring reverb, but that uses light sensors and infrared to read the audio. It's insane. It's like nothing else sounds like this. There's some really good videos on the net if you want to check that out. And the other thing is the wave from Genki. I can't remember if I showed you this before. So this is a little ring you can wear on your finger. And then it senses, I feel like I've already bored everybody with this. It senses your hand motion this way, and this way. And then it also knows when you tap. And it hooks up Bluetooth so you can MIDI it into Ableton or whatever. But more importantly, there is a module called the Wavefront, which will spit out control voltages for each axis of movement. And I just finished a low roar record, and I did nothing but this to control VCAs and filters. And holy shit, it's amazing. You're just conducting with it. So those two things, I think they're the only gear I bought other than speakers in years, and both absolutely mind-blowingly cool. Like you order stuff and you think, oh, is it really going to be as cool as
All right,
it
I'm back.
looks?
It was that was the fastest pee I ever took, so I don't even know if.
Nice, man. Well done.
All right,
That's
I'm
all right.
back.
I was just boring him with some stuff, but
All right, sorry about that. Just
you
just
got it
quick. You know?
because Huun-Huur-Tu, we can't go that fast over it because they're iconic. So first of all, do you want to talk a little bit about who they are and then how you met them and what the idea was with your guys' partnership? Because it's 2 records, I think.
Yeah, we did. So Huun-Huur-Tu, for people who might not know, they're they're Tuvan throat singers, and they're the most famous and kind of founding fathers of this genre. And so my dear friend Mark Governor asked me if I wanted to mix this record that they made. So I met the manager, Vladimir, and it wasn't for a lot of money, which was fine. And I said, look, Mark, you know, I'll do this kind of on my free time, this and that, and the other thing. And then I started to do it. And then I was like, look, mate, this needs some work. So why don't we do these overdubs? And okay, fast forward, it was a Huun-Huur-Tu and Carmen Rizzo record. Now you have to remember, these guys had only worked, the Tuvan people were nomads until the 30s. They had only worked with Ry Cooder, Kronos Quartet, and Frank Zappa in the history of their time. And they're working with me. So I said to them, let's just put this out, Huun-Huur-Tu and Carmen Rizzo, because I had redid all this parts and blah, blah, blah.
Now, when it came to you, was it a very traditional record or did it already
Yes.
have?
No, it was very traditional. It had some songs I didn't like. I just said, these songs are really ambient and these are more folk songs. Let's concentrate on the ambient stuff and let me add some stuff and put it out. Okay, not a big deal, whatever. Didn't even think about it. It blew up. KCRW started playing the shit out of it. All these radio stations are playing. I'm like, what? What's going on? And then we're getting these requests to play in Russia, play in Kazakhstan, and then Hollywood Bowl. And I was like, what's going on? And to this day, you know, we're still making music and we've toured the world. And I'm super proud of these records. And they're incredible musicians. And it was a beautiful partnership, the five of us, I guess. And I'm very proud of that. So that's my Huun-Huur-Tu work.
It's great. I mean, just the fact that they were open to it and embraced it in such ways, just it's amazing in a way, but it makes perfect sense in another way.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that it just, you know, felt really natural because I felt that I was doing a good job. Yeah, and it's really good music. They're fantastic people.
They're incredible. But it's another example of being fearless because, I mean, they are, not only are they great musicians and they've got this incredible legacy, and then you talk about the very few collaborators they've had and the level those collaborators are on, but they're sort of an institution, but it's also a very traditional form of music. I mean, it's a Mongolian nomadic music with a very specific type of singing, instruments that are not used anywhere else. And you're like, nah, this isn't as good as it could be. Check this out. Like, who does that?
Well, thank you. I mean, again, I guess it goes back to being fearless because I want my work to represent, you know, like this is good work. Who cares? And you got to do the work, and it's not just hired help. Like I could have just mixed that and said, here you go. But I felt obligated to try to make it better and diplomatically sell them on it. Because again, I just know that when I die, I want people to go through my legacy of work and just say, you did that, you did this, and it being eclectic. I don't want to be known just for one thing.
Well, I mean, there is no chance of it not being eclectic because it's, you know, it's all over the place. But at the same time, there is this common thread, and it's your musicality. Like I was talking before about, you know, your programming has a very distinctive thing to it that is very much you and not just you copying other people and whatever. But I think that extends past just drum programming. But to to go into a Huun-Huur-Tu record and say, yeah, man, let's put some programming on there. Like, what?
Well, you know, and you know, Andrew, I mean, we're all work for hire in the end of the day, but there's nothing better than getting inspired by new music that you want to work on. It is the best feeling in the world. And even at my age and all these records on the wall and shit, I get just as excited today as I do, or as I did in the beginning. I mean, I'll give you two examples, two current records out. The Miriam Ben Amour, who's this incredible woman from Tunisia living in Vancouver, I'd put her voice against anyone's I've ever worked with, calls me, do you want to do this record? Independent. I'm singing in all these languages. I'm like, I'm in. To the polar opposite of Melissa Lingo, who is this absolute, she's Joni Mitchell, you know, reborn. And you're like, should we go to a remote part of the forest and record my record outside? Absolutely. And I'm getting just as excited from two drastically different projects because in the end, the music is good. And you feel proud when that record comes out, you can say, I'm a part of this somehow. And that makes me feel good.
Well, let's talk about the Melissa Lingo record for a second. I mean, that's jumping up to present day.
Yeah.
So you sent me a link to check this out because it came out, it was last week, right?
Well, it's up early. It officially comes out April 23rd.
Okay.
Next week.
All right. So there is not a beat on this record.
Yeah. Zero. No rhythm.
So I would love to know, how did it come about and because I mean, I think most people, especially after all this stuff we're talking about, would say, okay, well, you're the guy who would convince her to put some programming on there or whatever. But that is not the record she needed to make. But recognizing that and making that record, how did it come about? Because you wouldn't seem like necessarily an obvious choice, but also how did you decide that that's the record that was going to happen? I mean, obviously, you don't decide it for her, but just the process.
No, this is a really good story because I'm really proud of this record. And you're right. I'm probably not the first choice to make an acoustic record, like a folk campfire record. It's a long story. I'll really make short because it's interesting.
No, don't make it short.
She was living, she's American, but she's only like 30 years old. She's living in Cambodia, running an NGO, saving young children from sex trafficking or something, teaching music. And a mutual friend, this woman, runs into her at some place playing a gig and says, "Hey, Carmen, you should check out this girl." And I didn't think much of it. I was like, yeah, she's really good. Another singer-songwriter playing with a celloist. You know, it was good. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I was like, okay, cool. She lives in Cambodia, So she comes back to America. She moves back to Nevada City, which is near Lake Tahoe. And we connect, long story. And she's like, "Can you help me? I'm working with this guy. I'm going to put out my record." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll help you. I'll give you some advice." But she was very frustrated with the person she was working with. It was going slow. It sounded like it wasn't a good marriage. I said, "Well, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know this guy. Let me hear the demos." The demos blew my fucking mind. And I'm like, holy shit, like these are incredible. And she was falling out with this current person, which, no disrespect, I don't know the guy, but it just wasn't working out. So I said, "Why don't we do some work together?" And we just figured it out. And then I said, "What little I know about you, you need to work in your element. You are this bohemian singer-songwriter, plays all these instruments. You live in the forest here. Why don't we go out and record in the forest?" I mean, we had no money or nothing. I was like, I don't want to borrow a bunch of gear. I don't want a fucking remote truck. We're going to come out with a laptop and 2 mics.
Yeah.
And we hiked and we found a quiet spot and we hit record. And every 2 hours, my stupid MacBook battery, which is crap, I had to run to the car, wait there for an hour where it charged and go back, record. We're at 32% battery. You got one more take in you, go back and charge. And then she came back to LA. We did a few overdubs. Seal really loved it. He let us use his studio to do one song. And I made the record. But the point is, I didn't want rhythm, nor did she. We didn't want a band. It was me and her. And I said, "This is the kind of record that you need to make. You will make countless records with and without me, but this is the record you need to make right now." So that's what we did.
That's great. And did she just love that? Like that was the record she wanted to make?
That was the record she wanted to make. And it's beautiful. And it was surprising how great you can make a sound. You can make a record sound outside. I didn't mind the birds occasionally. A few times the wind, we stopped, but that was a part of the charm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, Zeppelin did it, like it's people forget.
Yeah, it's kind of a part of it. So I really am really proud of this record, and I hope she does well because she's a wonderful human being and has a great story.
Well, it's a beautiful record. It really is. And it sounds like if no one told you where it was recorded, you wouldn't necessarily know, but it does have an extra thing to it.
Yeah. I'd never done that before, Andrew, post up in a forest and hit record.
Most people haven't.
It was pretty, I have friends like, "Yeah, we bought these generators." I'm like, "No, man, this is old school, no money, like 2 microphones, 2 cables, and a fucking blanket."
And that's guitar voice, live vocals. So those are all the vocals from the woods.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's only like 2 songs we did vocals inside. Everything else was outside.
Right. It's great. It's great. Everyone needs to check that out. All right, look, we're going to go backwards a little bit because we got a few things to cover, and then we'll get to a little bit of Q&A. But going back to 2008, you did music for a video game, The Agency.
Oh, yeah.
So you want to talk a little bit about
PlayStation, No, it was not agency.
Well,
Uncharted.
oh, well, maybe they changed the name after, because I saw an interview with you at a games conference talking about the agency, a Sony game.
Yeah, we did my friend Gerard and I did something for that, but the big gaming credit is Uncharted. You know this game
Yeah,
Uncharted?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so that was a big gig for me because I'm really proud of it. They had tempted Trent Reznor, Portishead, and me for the closing, and they picked me. Probably because I was probably the cheapest one. But that was great. That was good fun. That was my entrance into the gaming world, which allowed me then to go into a film gig with Michael Apted, the late great Michael Apted.
Right. Well, come on, more than that. Let's hear.
Well, that will go into okay. My first film gig, a dear friend of mine, Gemma Dempsey, was music supervisor for this documentary about the World Cup, about music. And Michael Apted, who, may he rest in peace, just died last year, I think of COVID, unfortunately, I think. But he did like Coal Miner's Daughter, Gorillas in the Mist. He was a Oscar-winning film director, and he did this. And so it came down to me and one other person who I won't mention, who was a dear friend of mine, for this gig. And this other friend of mine was way better than me, had just got off a big film, was a better choice. And I said to Gemma, he's a better choice than me. You should hire him. He got the gig. And unfortunately, he got fired from the gig and they called me. And I did the film. But it goes back to, I spoke highly, I was respectful, and I got the gig. And then that allowed me to kind of enter in the film world. I did a few films. And then I kind of stopped. I did another thing for Michael Apted, but that's a whole other industry that it's a full-time gig. And, you can't do records in film. Like there's one person, like Trent Reznor's the only one who can do it. And he's in the not even 1 percentile. So I don't really do a lot of film work, unfortunately. Not that I wouldn't want to, but it's kind of a full-time gig,
Yeah.
to do that. And I don't do that. So, I mean.
Right. Well, but you did do some work with A.R. Rahman, right?
A.R. Rahman, yeah. A.R. It became a good friend and we did some work together and I'm really proud of that work. And he's huge. He's India's biggest star. And I've been to India a few times with him to do a master class in his conservatory. And that's a big credit because he's pretty big.
Yeah. Well, you want to talk about what that was? Because it wasn't, some of it was with Dido too, right? Wasn't there a track with Dido?
Yeah, he did that. What's that movie with James Franco, 127 Hours or whatever?
Yeah.
That movie. And so I did a big remix for him of that. That got a lot of play on KCRW. That got him an Oscar nomination. And then I performed with him on a few gigs. And then we traveled together. Yeah, just lots of incidental things with him.
It's so funny. You're just so understated. Like, yeah, and I went and performed with him, did a few gigs.
Well, no, because he says to me, he's like, no, dude, it's all fucking timing. He's like, hey, I got asked to do, or I'm on the 100 Time Magazine 100 most influential people, and we're doing a gig at Lincoln Center. Do you want to do it with me? I'm like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but sure. And then we're playing in front of the Obamas, and I'm like, my role was really insignificant, but the part of it was like, flying to New York and doing this. Yeah, so little things like this,
Man, little things like that, like, just playing Lincoln Center. You've played the Hollywood Bowl. You've played.
I played the Hollywood Bowl 3 times.
3 times with different people.
I played it with Oakenfold twice, and then Huun-Huur-Tu with Flying Lotus. Animal Collective, yeah.
It's insane.
I forget about that. It was fun, though. It was a good time.
How do you even forget about that? That's amazing.
I mean, you forget, I don't know.
All right.
I've done a lot.
Okay, so here's someone else you've done a lot with is BT.
Oh, I love Brian. Yeah, I'm really proud of stuff I've done with him. And I love that he's a technologist like me, him and Tom Holkenborg, Junkie XL. I just love that they're nerds like me. Like we can, like we can geek out And that's things that people don't know about you, about your amazing skill set, but you're a fucking nerd. Like you
Oh,
are a
I'm a super
technologist.
nerd. Super
You are
nerd.
forget about your audio skills of mixing and engineering and producing, but you could build a console. You know? And that's great. And so Brian, back to BT, he's like that, you know, where he's a real nerd, you know, which I love. Yeah, anyway.
Well, so how did you hook up with him? And because you actually did some music with him, and then since then you've had a relationship doing just all sorts of
Yeah,
collaborations. But
I did some remixing for him, and then I got to know him, which is a whole other chapter of my career. Is, you know, I was very involved with the Grammys, and I wrote the album category, best electronic album category.
Yeah, you did the presentation.
I wrote 3 Grammys. Best electronic album category. I wrote the Grammy for 2 technical Grammys for Apple and for Roger Lynn.
And by writing, I mean you were the one who submitted the paper that actually made them exist. So you made the category for best electronic album even exist.
The very first one was Apple. I got hate mail back then when people were like, "Who is this fucking kid submitting it for Apple?" And they ended up getting it.
Yeah.
They hated me for that. Then the best electronic album category, I was like, how do I do an album category? And they're like, who is this fucking kid? Tell him it's 4 years. It takes forever. I'm like, okay. So then I called up Oakenfold, BT, Jason Bentley, and Brian, BT. I was like, can you help me co-write this? And we wrote it. And then I was a trustee at that time. I was a governor, and then I got promoted to a trustee. And I was the one that went to the board of trustees, and I'll never forget, that is one of my biggest accolades in my career, mate, is sitting in front of like 100 fucking suits in this meeting, and this young kid reading this proposal, and it got passed. And then I wrote, so this category, then they were giving out these technical Grammys to people. And I'm like, why doesn't Roger Lynn have one? He invented the drum machine. And they're like, fuck off, go back and write it. And I waited 4 years, but I got him that Grammy.
Yep. Yeah.
Well deserved. Well deserved.
And also, I want to say that you changed the culture for the best engineered record non-classical category thing, because you were a huge advocate for Odelay the year that came out.
Andrew, because I made some big enemies in my life where they won't call me enemies, but I was always the renegade on those Grammy board meetings because I was always bringing up sore subjects and I was challenging people, and they didn't like that. And I was the engineer chair for a long time. And I brought in people like yourself, and I was challenging them because the same people were winning those awards. And I would say to those guys, unfortunately, just guys, hey man, what is the difference if you're at Ocean Way with 3 assistants and every microphone and piece of gear, or you're in your bedroom making a record with 1 microphone? It's still a skill set. And why are those records getting overlooked?
Yeah. I mean, this is, from what I remember, it started with Odelay, which was not, I mean, that was made on a Neve in a real studio, but it was distorted and it had samples, and they didn't want to hear a word about it. And you championed that record. Like, that is the best sounding record.
Thank you. And I fought, and I made some fucking enemies back then, but I didn't give a shit. Sorry. Because I said, and I will swear by this, there is no difference between that kid or that man or woman in a bedroom with nothing. It takes chops.
Yeah.
But you go to Record Plant or one of these nice studios you don't do shit, not that you don't do shit. You have tools. It's a different skill set. I know it's hard, but at least give that other person a chance.
Yeah. And then look at the mainstream where Billie Eilish wins every fucking Grammy in the world for a bedroom record.
Well, it's come a long way, but
yeah.
You're the only person that's given me some props for that, because I took a lot of bullets back then.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I might be making this up, but weren't you also one of the people advocating to get the restriction taken off the engineering part of the Grammys so you didn't have to work on more than half the record? Because I seem to remember that happened around the same time, because there was...
I don't want to take full credit for that, but there were these people that were fighting that, somebody recorded a hi-hat and they got a Grammy or something. which is fair enough. I mean, there's
Yeah.
certain rules that should apply, but I mean, nowadays there's like, 150 people in like somebody makes record of the year. It's like fucking Walmart goes up there to get that award. It's, okay, fair enough. There's a lot of people making that record.
Yeah.
It's just different time, different.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. All right, look, we don't have a whole lot more in terms of just going through records and stuff, but I want to
the Q&A. I want to see.
Well, hold on. We're going to get there. Don't worry. We'll get there. But I want
if there's anybody even left, there's probably
there are thousands of people still here. I swear to you. But I just want you to talk a little bit about another one of your solo projects. Hundreds of thousands, says Mark, which I think he's lying there. Yeah. But talk a little bit about the Libella project that you've been doing with Joel Shearer. I can't just
Libella is a side ambient project I have with Joel Shearer, who's one of my best, dearest friends, who I'm a huge fan of, and we're like brothers. And Joel's the king of ambient music. If you should discover his solo work if you haven't. And so we were both kind of independently making ambient stuff and loving it. And we both travel a lot. And we were like, hey man, let's make this record together. So it took us 3 years to make the record because we were never in the same room in the same city. So I'd be in Russia and he'd be in Germany or, wherever around the world. And we would be trading files. And then we finally made this record, and it's a beautiful ambient record. And it's not huge, but we have very loyal fans. And we were lucky that we got an Apple ad, we got a Prada, and we got something else.
Fucking hell, man.
I mean, not high paying, don't get me wrong, but
that's still pretty good though.
Yeah. And so it's a really beautiful record. I'm really proud of it. And it'll probably take us another 3 years to make another record, but he's great. And if you should discover him. Yeah,
amazing. So, all right,
because you did a lot of work with him. I think you mixed one of his records, didn't you?
Well, we did the first EP with his band when he finally decided he was going to sing. So yeah, we did the first EP at my place, which I'm still super proud of. I mean, that's one of the few things I've done that I can listen to and I actually really love it.
But before we close, we're
not closing yet. There's more stuff.
People have to go to bed or go eat.
No, nobody has to go do shit. Because look, we got to. Okay. When I met you, I thought you looked like Prince. You worked with Wendy and Lisa all the time. Susan Rogers, one of your mentors, but you never actually worked with Prince. But you did a remix. You did a remix for Get Off, which was bad ass.
Yeah, I did that with Brett and Epic, which were big at the time. And, I feel like I was a part of that Prince camp between Cad and Sheila E. and all the countless people and all my stories of being in the same room and all this stuff. But yeah, I did do a Prince remix to Get Off, which was fun and which was a good song. And that was fun. So we did that. Yeah.
And I want to make sure I've got this right, because I've got in my head that he had all the remixes done before he finished the album version and actually pulled a few elements off the remixes into the album version. Is that right? Or did I make that up?
I don't think so. Get Off was done. It was on the album, and then we got the files, and then we did the remix, as far as I remember.
Okay. So I made that up.
I think you might have, at least from my recollection.
Yeah. That's fine. Completely made up. All right. Now look, you've also got a long-lived relationship with Pete Townsend. And we haven't even mentioned him.
Yeah, that's a good story. Yeah, there's a lot of hidden gems that we could do another session, but Pete Townsend is one of those things that's a great story, because I had produced a Delirium record, which is this record, and the two guys are based in Canada. And this is a good story. So one of the guest singers was Rachel Fuller, who is Pete's girlfriend. Wonderful artist. This woman is incredible on her own. She's a classically trained musician. And anyway, so she gets a hold of me and says, can I send you these guitar files? I can't remember how it worked. Basically, she sent me these guitar files. I didn't know it was Pete Townsend. I didn't know it was her girlfriend. I'd finished the record. And they hit me up. They're like, this is amazing. Who's this guy? And then she says, I'm trying to remember. basically, I didn't know it was Pete Townsend until I did it. And then they were so impressed. He calls me and is like, do you want to work with us? I'm like, this is Pete Townsend. What? So I fucking fly to London, or I was in London or something. And I took the fucking tube. You know, he lives in Richmond.
Yeah.
So
St. Margaret's. Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right where I lived for like 6 months when I first moved to London.
So he picks me up at the fucking tube in his Mercedes, takes me back to the crib, and we have dinner, and then we work, and then he flies me back to produce this record with Rachel, and like walks me across the street to the hotel, checks me into the hotel, and I'm like producing a record with Pete Townsend, and I'm like, what? I mean, actually on his barge, you know the barge,
yeah,
on the River Thames, and then he'd come to LA, and then he's like, hey mate, are you busy? Do you want to work? And we'd work at my studio. It was just weird, and then he'd say, hey, I'm playing Staples Center, I'm playing Hollywood Bowl, I'm playing the Greek Theater, and I'd go see him. We hang out. He's such an amazing guy, really. Yeah. That's my Pete Townsend story.
That's pretty good.
He's a lovely guy.
It's pretty good. There's one other guy I want to talk about on your label. Caravanserai, those records are...
Oh, Caravanserai. Caravanserai. He's
fucking
great.
amazing.
Ryan is wonderful. He's really good. I made 3 records with him. Really good world music artist. A very nomadic kind of gypsy style lifestyle. He's lived all over the world, and when it wasn't fashionable to be a traveler, and a wonderful guy. I'm really proud of those records as well. And also taking a chance. I mean, his record was in the top 20 biggest world music records last year. And I took a chance with this guy, and he's great.
Yeah. And also Gabriel Johnson.
Yeah. Another great guy, trumpet player.
Yeah. Fucking ridiculous trumpet player.
Yeah. He's one of the few people that went to NED as a trumpet player. I mean, New England Digital. I mean,
New England Conservatory.
Sorry. New England Conservatory. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. Really amazing.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. So you're going to make me stop just saying things.
Well, but I want to say one thing about you, because for people who are listening, I mean, I'm, your family to me. You're my brother, and I've seen your kids grow up, and I know your wife really well. And I am so honored and so privileged to say that we've done so much together. I mean, we have such a history,
Tons.
Not only as friends growing up and experiencing a career that is interchanged, seeing your career. I mean, I'll save this for when you get interviewed, but I remember a moment in your life when you weren't going to do it anymore.
There have been a few of those.
You literally, I mean, I don't know if I had anything to do with this, but I remember having this conversation where you were just going to give it up, and you were going to really just not do it anymore. And me and others encouraged you to keep doing it. And then things fell into place, and then the rest is history. And, we have a lot of great history together, man. And we made some great music together, and there will be more in the future.
Absolutely.
But I remember that pivotal moment in your career where you really were your own. And instead of you being a part of other people's records in a different role, you were the king of the hill. And I couldn't be more proud of you. And I couldn't be more honored to call you my friend, because we share a lot together. So I just want to say
thank you. I mean, look, maybe I would have had a different career or something, but I would definitely not have had the career I've had without all of your help. Because, I mean, you were calling me in on sessions that I had no business working on. And you're like, no, man, come on, get in here, do this. And sometimes it was just transferring some files or whatever, but you always had me in there, and it was amazing.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I form a team, and my team I'm loyal, and, it was fun, wasn't it? We were around some pretty influential records and influential
fucking awesome.
People.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, it was great.
And on that note,
I can't imagine anybody having any questions other than what's my favorite baseball team or what tennis racket I'm playing these days, but who has anything to say?
Oh man, there are going to be lots of questions, and Mark's going to come in now and ask those questions, and then you're going to answer those questions.
Okay.
And it's going to be great, because we didn't even talk about the fact that you were artist relations at Native Instruments for years.
Yeah, that was a chunk of my life as well. So,
while making all these records and movies and video games.
Yeah, and wearing many hats and being a father and all this stuff. So,
yeah. There's always that
So
Three kids.
there's the handsome Mark. So what?
There's Mark.
Hello.
Hello.
I feel like you guys should talk about that part.
What about
the
native instruments part?
Yeah.
Sure. What do you want to
Do
say? Do you want to ask me, or do I tell you?
No. Okay. Here, I'll ask you. So, Carmen, tell us about native instruments.
Okay. So I ran artist relations for Native for about 7 years in America. I was one of the fortunate artists to be endorsed by them, and they were courting me to do this, and I had never had a job before. So I said, as long as I can kind of take time off without pay and do some shows, make some records, etc. And they said, okay. And I did it, and I don't regret it. Unfortunately, it ended in October of last year. We parted ways. And on the bright side, I would say it really allowed me to discover new music in a different way that I might not have discovered it before, because I felt that I was a good person for the job, because I wasn't too old and retired and was out of the mix, and I wasn't some young kid with no experience. I felt that I was in the middle. I had the legacy on my shoulders, and I had, the young attitude, and I could talk music and I could talk tech. So saying that, I felt I was a good fit for the role. And then I would say it allowed me to discover new music. Like I helped discover Odessa and, the whole Drake camp, and be involved early days and become close friends with 40 and a lot of music makers and bands, and have a little bit of a influence on maybe some of these people's career. So I think I brought a lot of value to Native. So I hope that they appreciated the value I brought. So that's my 45-second story with Native.
There you go. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it brought, because obviously they're building tools that everybody's using, but it's hard to get, like, how do you have credibility as a software company? And you brought that. You had people coming in who were like the people doing it before Native existed, and then were using their stuff because it made their lives easier and it proved the point for them.
Well, yeah, because I think for any of the manufacturers, for any of you guys or girls that use software or hardware, sure, anybody wants free gear, but that wasn't my motto. It was more of like finding opportunity, creating, relationships with people that you do partnerships with, as opposed to here's free gear, because I could talk music and I could talk tech. So it's showing people how to use this on stage or in the studio and giving them knowledge, as opposed to here's a free piece of gear, show, like, hi, I use this piece of gear. Like, that's just fucking bullshit. I wasn't interested in that. So I hope I had some influence on the modeling. I mean, it was challenging, I would say, on the negative side, because there were corporate things in place, and there was a lot of people in the company that they don't know music or tech. And that was hard for me, because how can you market something that you don't know music or tech? And that was where I would run into brick walls. But that's probably the case.
Yeah, but I love the way you treated the job, because like you say, it allowed you to discover music. But what you're doing is, it's almost like A&R 20 years earlier. You're finding artists, and they're getting known because of getting endorsed by NI and doing ads and all this kind of stuff.
And I felt a part of like nurturing these artists of like, you can buy the gear yourself, but if you want a relationship, you can be a part of the process and see how it works. And I can show you, or someone else can show you, how you should incorporate this on stage or in the studio. Because, like, for instance, the MIDI controllers, most people don't use it with complete control. It's just a fucking overpriced MIDI controller with some fancy lights. Okay, cool, use it. But if you have the relationship and you can show them how to use it with complete control, it's a game changer and it's wonderful. But not everybody at the company can show them that.
Yeah.
Or they don't even know what complete control is. So granted, I'm generalizing, but I formed those relationships. I could sit and nerd out with people, and a lot of them couldn't.
Look, man, there's an interview, I can't even remember who it's with, but it's at your studio in Hollywood, from, I don't know, probably when we were working together. And you're like showing them your lemur that's sitting in the corner because now you got that running on an iPad. And like you're a nerd and you've always been incorporating stuff. But at the same time, it wasn't ever just, oh, let me get what's new, because your MPC 60 was part of that rig forever.
Yeah, sure.
And that could have gone away because you knew what made music, not just what had the newest lights on it.
Well, that's my point. And if you're a real nerd, it's not, I don't get off on, in a different way. I'm just more interested, like now it's bringing a resurgence for like modular. No one's real making music with modular synths necessarily, but they're making great noise and sound. And if you can incorporate into that, God bless you. But the point is, people are finding inspiration from it. That's cool. But like, if you're using the NI because it's got blue lights on it and colored lights, okay, cool. But like, why not use it how it was built? Most people can't be bothered.
Yeah.
That's a choice. It's a choice.
Yeah. All right. Before Mark gets in here, there's one story that I can recount it or you can recount it. And I've been trying to remember, was it on the Beth Nielsen Chapman record or was it on something else where we went down the street to go to Charlie Chaplin's office? What record was that?
Beth Nielsen Chapman.
It was Beth Nielsen Chapman.
Were you with us on that?
Yes, it was the four of us.
Okay, so real quick for the audience, whoever's left.
This is amazing.
My studio overlooked the Scientology HQ, the headquarters of Scientology.
On Hollywood Boulevard.
In Ivar. Yeah. Or Ivar, yeah.
Yeah.
And we would stare at them all day doing whatever they're doing. So we would walk by it to go to this juice bar, get some food, juice, on Vine Street, and somebody told us Charlie Chaplin used to own this building, and because it's a historical landmark, he owns the third floor. His office is intact. So every day we'd walk by, and these two women would be out there penning out pamphlets. We're like, no. And one day they finally, we said, you got to let us up to the third floor. And one day they did.
Yeah.
Me, you, Beth and Annie, they let us up with security, and we got to see Charlie Chaplin's office.
Which in the middle of this like incredible white carpet, fluorescent light thing, you open the door and it's an office from the 30s. It's all dark wood paneling. There's a coat on the coat hook. There's a picture of him on the desk.
That's right.
Unbelievable.
I forgot you were there. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, we have probably a lot more stories, but that was a good story.
It was amazing. But my favorite part of it was, so the whole time we're there, they're like people standing guard out in the hallway to make sure we don't go wandering off or whatever. So we just go in the office and have a look, and they were cool about it. But then on the way out, I don't know if you remember this, we went up in the elevator, but on the way out, they said, well, we'll take the stairs down. And as we're going towards the stairs, he said, oh, you saw Charlie's office. Do you want to see L. Ron Hubbard's office? I'm like, no, that's cool.
That's right. They were trying to pitch us on L. Ron Hubbard. I was like, nope.
No, we already saw the cool office.
That's
so
right.
If there are any Scientologists watching, it's nothing. It was just an incredible moment in LA history. Exactly. It's more about the craziness of that LA landmark being in the middle of that. It's just nuts.
That's right. That's a good story. I'm glad that you remembered that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Mark, you can come in and ask about compressors or something, or vocal chains or something like that. He's coming.
There he is.
There he is.
All right, I'm here.
Oh, Machina Mark III. Hey.
Man, I go get my white Mark II.
I have a jam over here too. I
got
turn the camera on
my
and do
Complete
this.
Control 49 over there. I ordered a 63, but it's been out of stock for like months.
The COVID, they're out of stock everywhere, I think.
Yeah. All right, Mark, what do you got?
All right, there are literally millions of people on the internet.
Yeah, right.
Some of them are in our room right now asking questions. Okay, so for everybody watching, how this works, we're broadcasting on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and most importantly, in Crowdcast, where you can ask your questions and have them upvoted by other people in the chat. And we start with the most upvoted question and work our way down from there. So our number one most upvoted question is from Adrian. And Adrian says, after all these amazing accomplishments, Do you now live in the moment, so to speak, or are there any crazy ideas you might still be secretly chasing down the road that we can look forward to? In other words, you're still young, so what would you like to do in the future?
Oh dear. I mean, in general or musically?
Either up
One.
to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to always be in love and be creative. I mean, someone asked me this recently, and it's like, if I could just be in love and create every day, that's all I want. And it has nothing to do with money or where I live. So still looking for love, but I would say I always just want to be inspired by new music. I mean, we all have to make a living fair, and we all have to do things that maybe pay the bills fair. But there's nothing more rewarding than working with artists in music that you're proud of. I mean, case in point, the Miriam Benamor or the Melissa Lengo, two recent projects that I'm just so proud of, that are just incredible music, So,
are there any artists right now that you would love to work with? Anyone in particular you think like, oh man, I could make the shit out of a record with them?
That's a good question. I don't know if something comes off. I mean, I'm fans of other artists and musicians that I would like to be a part of, but it's more about a collaboration. I want to go a little bit more deeper into world music, because I feel like I've kind of accepted this as a good chunk of my career, is a lot of world music in this hybrid, but I feel fearless more in that realm, because I feel like, because I've got a good reputation in that world and people look up to me in that world, I've kind of earned that respect. I feel like I can take bigger chances. And that's why I don't always enjoy mainstream records, is that there's too many barriers. You can't take as many chances in those records.
Right.
And that kind of bums me out.
Right.
So creatively, I have more freedom on those kinds of records.
Right. Well, because you're creating it. It doesn't exist yet. So.
Well, you're creating it, and you can, even if it's from a mixing, and, Andrew, like if you want to pan something a certain way or do something a certain way, there's so many records that are formulated, which is fine. It's just that I don't really like, I'll never forget this moment in my career, and sorry to go off the Q&A real quick, but there was a time where I was working at Larrabee, and I was working with Seal, and I was doing some other records, like, I don't even remember what they were, but they were a little bit left of center. And I was fortunate to be doing something sonically different. And Dave Way, who's a good friend of mine, was doing like Spice Girls and all these big records and making a lot of money. And he goes, man, how are you doing all these cool records? And I was like, how are you making all this money, Dave? Like, you're fucking a zillionaire making these big records, mixing Spice Girls, and God only knows his wallet. And I'm doing these cool records making no money. But he said it with humility, like he wanted to do what I was doing. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm just doing it.
Well, and you said it before, like nobody's asking you how much did you get paid when you worked on that record. It's like, holy shit, you worked on that record. And your entire career has been based on holy shit, you worked on that record.
Well, and I always tell this, to people, don't talk money, just win them over with your work and your love. The money will come, and the credential, that credit is worth more than the fucking dollar sign. It just is, because that will get you the next gig, and that will get you the reputation and the confidence and the long list. I mean, Andrew, I don't even know how many fucking Grammys you have, but no one's asked you probably how much you got paid. They said, you did that record?
The only time it's ever even like something close to it was, speaking of Trent Reznor and his film career, was I went over to see my friend Joe Barresi, episode 2 of this interview series, and he was doing something with Atticus Ross, because he does a lot of engineering for Atticus, and Atticus is Trent's partner in all of the film scores. So Joe introduces me. He's like, hey man, this is my friend Andrew. He did the Bunch of Chili Peppers records and the latest Adele record. And Atticus stands up and goes to shake my hand and says, you must be a very wealthy man. And this is like, I was the only mixer not to get a point on the Adele record. And all I could think was like, fucking hell.
Yeah, but it doesn't fucking matter.
And it doesn't matter at all.
Because,
and, he's saying it as a joke, but it's like,
But the point, but from the outside, that Adele record got you probably so much work.
Absolutely.
It doesn't even matter. So I just think it's important that people listen. If you believe in a project like this, Melissa Lingo or Miriam as an example, it had nothing to do with money. It was like, I want to work with you.
Yeah.
I don't care. That's
yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I just finished a low roar record, which those cost me money to make. And I'm developing this other artist I just came across from France who I think is fucking amazing.
Yeah. And when I did that low roar remix for you.
Yeah. Which you put on your playlist, which is amazing.
I love that so much. And if you guys don't know this band that Andrew is on his label and worked with, et cetera, it's really good. It's this guy living in Iceland, right?
Well, no, he went to Poland. Now he's in Sweden. So yeah, he's all over the place. But yeah,
anyway, he's
super talented. Yeah.
All right, next question. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so our next one is kind of a three-parter. So I'm gonna break it up into three questions. So this is from Jimmy in Seattle, and he says, "Hey Rizzo, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to share your experience, knowledge, and stories. Question, when you make your electronic music for your albums and score for TV, what is your approach to TV and film? What is your approach to arranging, playing, and recording?" So that's part one.
What's part two? Or do I answer it in sections?
What? Yeah, let's answer it in sections.
What's my approach to arranging? Well, I often start with rhythm, if that makes sense. So I start with rhythm and see what works and what doesn't work. I wouldn't say that I have a method of what comes first. If you're talking about film and TV, is that what he said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that there's a real method, but I would say that I kind of start with rhythm often to get a theme.
Awesome. Okay, cool. The next one is there a particular DAW that you prefer?
Yes, like Andrew, I'm a Pro Tool user, but I always say to people, because this question comes up, I always say, what's the best DAW? The best DAW is the one that you know the best. Don't let anybody tell you one's better than the other. It's what you know best, because Fruity Loops is as good as Pro Tools if you're making a good record. In Pro Tools is as good as Logic if you're making a good record. I use Pro Tools. I would say I use Ableton second, a close second, because every DAW does something different than the next. There's, right, Andrew? I mean, like there's something that the other one does better or worse, but Pro Tools is my go-to. Ableton's my second. Logic, I struggle with because I don't know it as well, but I'm using it sometimes.
Awesome. Do you master your own projects?
I use Dale Becker, who I'm so proud that I can take credit a little bit, where I kind of discovered him when he was no one. And he's really big now. Big, multiple Grammy nominated and winning mastering engineer. And a couple of projects I just recently mastered myself, which I'm not a mastering engineer, but when I can afford a mastering person, I use Dale. I used to use Chris Bellman at Bernie's. I've used Brian at Bernie's. I've used Bernie. They're all fantastic as well. It's really coming to budget, Chris Bellman for many years was my mastering engineer, then Dale for more recent stuff, but they're all great. All those people I mentioned are wonderful.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah, Dale's a super nice guy.
Isn't he great, Andrew?
Yeah.
And I'm so happy for him. And I'm not taking credit, but I remember him. I mean, he really wasn't very big, and he's really big now.
Yeah, I mean, I met him when he was mastering the Neil Diamond record I worked on, and
because his father's does the live sound for
exactly.
Neil. And
exactly.
Dale and his wife and kids, they're wonderful. He's a wonderful guy. So I'm so happy for him. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. He closes by saying, by the way, looking through leaves is amazing. And we used to practice martial arts forms while listening to it in class.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. That's one of my artist records.
Jimmy from Seattle.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. Our next question is from Quiz. And you just talked about it a little bit, but we'll see if there's more to it here. So actually, Crowdcast just replaced it on me. Okay. Oh, you guys are upvoting questions. That's what happens. All right, we're changing. Mick Benjamins says, What's the favorite project you've worked on and why? And a big hi from Berlin. You know who this is.
I love Mick. Mick's wonderful ex-colleague who used to, or he still works at Native. Wonderful guy. So thank you, Mick. My favorite record I've worked on, that's going to be hard. I don't know if I could just name a couple, I would probably say Lee Phillips has to be one of my favorite records that I worked on. I would say Seal, just because it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on that record. Of course, Sakamoto, Andrew mentioned. And I have to say the Niyaz records, I'm very proud of my work and my own records. So that's more than one. So sorry, Matt.
That's all right.
And what was the other question of that?
I think that was it. And why?
Yeah, that was it.
And why? Because you like them.
Why? Because I like them. Yeah, I mean, it's weird because you would probably say this, Andrew. You know, like, usually your favorite records aren't the most successful records, you know, because sure, Seal is probably the biggest record in sales. Let's say, I mean, I've worked at Coldplay, probably bigger, but you know, it's always these like Ecova, like these eclectic records that you're the most proud of my work. Like if someone had to look at my work, you know?
Yeah. And I think for me, it's also because I'm not, I mean, you're a full-fledged artist on your own. And even with the remixing or collaboration, you're definitely on the more artist side of things. And I'm not. So for me, it's also the ones I'm more involved in, like the Low Roar records, I'm really proud of because I've done so much more than just mixed it. Like, yeah, I'm super proud of the Chili Peppers records, but someone else could have mixed those records and they still would have been amazing. The Low Roar records, that first Pedestrian EP with Joel, I feel like I had a lot of input on that. So it's the ones where, not that I'm taking credit for them, but I feel like it's more of me in them.
Well, that's the point, is you have involvement from start to finish. And I think for a lot of us that are work for hire, you might come in and mix a song or, you know, do something as an overdub. But when you really, like the Seal record, you know, working on that one record for 3 years and having it be so successful and knowing every process of it, you feel proud of that record because you are a part of that, like others are a part of it. So yeah. I can't believe Mick is still up. Mick, big props, my brother. In Berlin, wow.
It's not even midnight there, man. He's fine.
No, but I'm surprised anybody even fucking listened, man. I would have tuned out hours ago.
There's millions of people on the internet. Yeah. Okay, next question is from Rez, and he says, can you talk some more about working on dance tracks with the likes of Tiesto and Oakenfold? So how long does it take? Are you together in the studio or working on stems? And what are you looking for as an overall sound? Or does it need a different approach? So
dance music, I would say in general, becomes formula. In my opinion, those two examples aren't good examples because they're not hands-on individuals. So I have to be careful what I say. Wonderful people. Paul has a vision. Paul knows what he wants, but I wouldn't say he's as much of a hands-on person as other, like BT or Tom Holkenborg or something like that. Or Zed, like Zed's an incredible musician, you know. I mean, Zed's more pop, but he started as a dance artist, right? But I would say a lot of dance music is formula, wouldn't you? I mean, I'm generalizing, but I don't make as many up-tempo tracks as I used to, which I want to get back to. I know with Miriam and I, we're doing a side project of Arabic music, and it's just too easy to do down-tempo ambient, so we're going to force ourselves to be up-tempo for lots of reasons, because it's too, everyone's making ambient music now. I'm trying to stop doing that.
Right.
Again, like Andrew, you like being fearless. It's like, as soon as it's fashionable, move right. Aside, go left or go right, because everyone's, I mean, I love ambient music. I have an ambient project. I think I'm good at it, but I gotta switch it up.
But you've done it. I've
done it and I love it, and I still will love it. And not to say I won't do it, but Yeah, I'm trying to mix it up. And that's why I did the Melissa record, which was like, you would have never thought me doing a campfire record, but it was so good I had to.
And it's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, couple more.
Yeah. Let's see here. So going on. Okay, so this is the one before he was outvoted mid-question. So this is from Quiz, and he says, "Hey, what's up, Carmen? This is Quiz from Basecamp, and I met you about 8 years ago when you were with Van I. He wants to know, how was your transition from being an A-list producer, engineer, mixer, and artist to being the lead manager of artist relations? And do you still produce? By the way, I'm grateful for all the help you gave me while you were at NI." So
thank you. Good question. It was really hard for me, guys. I have to say it was, I had to really check my ego at the door because it took me a while to learn. I purposely played down my past when I was at NI. I didn't want to talk about Grammy nominations. I didn't want to talk about who I knew and what I did. And there were some times where I was around some real fucking assholes, I have to say, artists or producers who would flex, who would drop names. And I'd think to myself, dude, I really had to bite my tongue of not name dropping and not like, you know how many gold records? I got fucking 19 fucking gold records on the wall. And there's more that I could order if I wanted to. Like, I could never say that. And even within the company, I didn't flex, and people kind of belittled me in some cases. And it really hurt my feelings. And it was hard. I didn't get a lot of support at Native. They didn't interview me. I was in the Grammy band for many years, a couple times on stage with NI gear. Nobody did an interview. It was hard to swallow. I had to really show humility because I had a job and I didn't want to flex. But in the end, I tried to bite my lip and try to, give the opportunity of like, when they wanted to go into studios and like, yeah, I know Jeff, the owner of the Village Recorder. Well, how do you know? Well, I made records there. Or, you'd softly flex like, yeah, I know the Grammys. I have a few nominations. I wrote a few categories. Like, you couldn't really, I don't know. I'm trying to say that diplomatically, but it was hard, man. It was really hard because people were knowing me for NI, not knowing me for my credentials. And I just had to say, okay, cool. That's who I am. But then when people found out, it was really nice because people knew who I was and they knew records I did. And that made me feel good. So.
Yeah.
I think that probably speaks to your character quite a bit, though, too, is that you weren't doing the flex and all of that. So
yeah,
kudos.
It was hard, but
yeah. Awesome. Okay, our next question, possibly the most important question. This is from Adrian again, and he wants to know, who is your favorite baseball team? This has been upvoted. So.
Where does he live?
Says, "Let's go Tribe."
Dodgers, man.
He's from Cleveland.
We just won 8 in a row. We just lost yesterday. We should have won. We shouldn't have changed that pitcher in the fucking 8th inning, but we should have won 9 in a row. But I'm a Dodger fan. Andrew's a Met fan. I used to be a Met fan when I was a kid, but are you still a Met fan, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, look, if I saw baseball, I would be a Mets fan. And the other reason, I'll tell you why, and I know you're going to argue with me with Vince Scully, but the Mets booth is the best. I would just pay to listen to them talk about shit.
Well, okay, I still listen to the game on the radio.
Okay, that's totally different then.
I don't watch the games. Once in a blue moon, I'll watch I don't even have a TV. I don't own a TV. But I'll listen on the radio, the games, because I just love it.
Right.
So I'm a loyalist. So Dodger fan. I'm a Dodger fan. But I just love baseball and tennis.
But the Mets have a better TV booth than anyone else in the league.
Well, now they do. But when Vince Scully was our...
Yeah. But then you can go back to the Yankee booth from like the 70s and 80s.
But we share our passion with baseball, so it's good.
I used to, but the problem with me is I'm super obsessive. So when I was really following baseball, I was watching 162 games a year. And who the hell's got time for that? Like, I wasn't sleeping. you know.
Yeah, but do a lot of people know that Andrew's actually from Florida?
No.
Or you went to school. Well, you're
I went to school in Florida, but I was born in Cleveland and then was in Columbus, Ohio for a little bit, but I grew up on Long Island.
Long Island, but Florida is a big chunk of your life.
Well, 4 years down there, yeah. But my dad was both my parents grew up in the Bronx. Never forgave the Dodgers for moving west. Like fuck them, and became Mets fans because of that.
No, a lot
and
of people
hated the Yankees. Hated the Yankees.
Good. Well, they're having a shitty season right now. Thank God. Thank God.
But I do remember watching there. For some reason, there were a couple of Yankees games we watched when I was a kid, and it was Phil Rizzuto.
Yeah.
You know, and they would just be talking about shit like, "Hey, you should come over for a barbecue this weekend," and they would like miss home runs.
No, but that's the great thing about like the radio when you listen to the game. It's just all the side talk and the small talk around the game that's just so valuable.
Yeah,
that's why I like the radio.
And holy cow, he hit that ball a mile.
Yeah. Well, and all of them have their signature.
Yeah, they got the home run calls. Absolutely,
they got the home. Yeah, exactly.
It's out of here. That's the Gary, the one for the Mets.
Their thing.
All right. Anyway,
any more? One or two more? What's up?
Should we?
Yeah. We had two just come in. So Quiz asks, do you still have a studio? And also, are you in the box?
So after a divorce and selling my house and having to get rid of my studio is in my loft. So like a lot of people, this is you see the backside, but on the front side is a crap load of gear you don't see, and a closet full of gear, and a storage bin I rent full of gear. But to be quite honest, my studio fits in a backpack. I'm not a purist, and I make records in a box like probably most of us. I mean, I remember Andrew's studio, which was a museum, which was, in Van Nuys, which is, I mean, you just want to look, and now you're in the box as well, right?
Completely, 100%.
And I take great pride in saying that. Like, I am not a purist, and I don't give a shit. Like, you either like my records or you don't. I don't get off on, like, I've got two 165As. I mean, there's a whole analog rack here. I use the Arturia 165As.
But, okay, so I wanted to say, because no one's actually asked you, what's your favorite, blah, blah, blah. But I will say that you are a DBX 165A fanboy.
Yeah.
That would be your go-to compressor.
That's going to go in my grave.
And I think did that come from the John Barnes camp? Because he was really into him too.
He had it. Yeah, I think I've always been an API person because I did all those records at Sunset Sound Factory. The Prince records were API. My 165As, my Yuri 1145 EQ. Yeah, there's certain pieces of hardware, but I'm in a box and Pro Tool. I got faders. I still like faders. So I have an S1 and S3. I use a lot of the native stuff, of course. I'm in the box, to answer your question. That's a whole other episode of nerding out with plugins and stuff. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And our final question from Gabriel Raphael asks, what Arabic artist would you like to work with? And then he says, Amir Diab, ?
Game. Oh dear. What, Omar Solomon, who's really popular now. A lot of people have worked with him, like Fortet and stuff. Bjork worked with him. He's from Syria. I wouldn't mind working with him because he has this keyboard player I want to work with. They do like Syrian like weddings, and they play these really cheesy Oriental synths, and they play it really well. And I've always wanted to work with people like that. I don't know if I have a specific artist in an Arab country. I've been to Palestine a few times, like 3 times. Been to Gaza. I'd like to work with a Palestinian artist, but I don't have a specific artist in mind. But I love Arab music. I got Arabic on my tattoo, so I love it. Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
So I just want to say, sorry.
What do you got, Mark?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I posted the link to the Speed of Sound remix earlier in the conversation in all the chat rooms, and I think that we all collectively tried to boost up your plays. So we're all using it for background music along the way. So
It's a good remix.
thank you for that track, though. It's really special. It's really great.
No, it's I'm really proud of that. But I just want to thank you guys for, the Puremix platform, and Andrew for spearheading and hosting all this. I think it's wonderful that I know it requires a lot of effort and work and time of your busy schedule, but I think it's important for all kinds of music makers to hear stories and hear the wonderful journeys of all of us, whether we're young or old, of our journey of, making records. And I think it's a great platform. So anything I can do to help spread the love with the other.
Well, it's awesome because I think, especially now where credits, like, they don't even really exist, it's the only way who even did stuff is to talk about it.
Well, and that's
important.
funny you say that, and maybe we can end it by, I could reference so many stories when I was working at Native, which was people didn't know who Seal was. They didn't know who NXS was. They didn't know who, like, some of these people that I would bring into the office, or like music, like really big producers, like even Teddy Riley, I'd bring it, and I'm like, you don't know who these people are. And it breaks my heart, because I feel like if you're a sports person, you could be a kid playing NBA. You're going to know who who Bill Russell is, or you're going to know but if you're a fucking musician, know who these, you might not know, or you might not like Psychedelic Furs or something, but you should know there was a time of music that this was represented, or you don't know who some of these funk bands are. And it's sad. Like, young music makers have an attention span of 5 years. It seems like maybe 10 if you're lucky.
I gotta say, on the sports tip, we do a pub quiz online, little Zoom thing with a bunch of friends in the area. So I did a round. I was very proud of it. The round was Doctor Who, and the answer to every question was a doctor. So, like, Bones McCoy was an answer, Doc Holliday was an answer. Nobody had heard of Dr. J. Hadn't even heard of him. Because basketball is just not a thing over here.
How can you put a basketball in your hands and throw it through a hoop and not know who Julius Erving is?
It's not a thing over here. Not a thing over here.
Well, that's a shame, because if you're a musician, you should know famous, players, as an example, or producers, or.
It's like listening outside your genre. You should know some classical stuff, no matter what kind of records you make.
At least maybe I'm not, but like, maybe not know everything, but open up your palate. It's just like saying you eat hamburgers and French fries every day. I mean, really? So I just think that my point is that it's nice that you're bringing different calibers of music makers on the show, because I think it's important, because there are some people who don't know any of my credits. They're like, oh yeah, you work with Seal. I think, he was married to Heidi Klum. Oh yeah, I know that guy. But then I'll walk into a room and they'll be like, you did, DD, and they'll like kiss my feet, or, I don't know. So, and to me, that's flattering, because for the same reason of like knowing a cuisine, like.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's music is such a huge part of human existence that you need to know it.
Like art. Films. Like, if you're a fucking actor, you should know films.
Yeah.
Movies didn't, like The Godfather. There was films before The Godfather.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're saying the same thing.
All right. There we go.
I love you guys. Anytime you want me, I'm there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And awesome. next week, speaking of Steely Dan, Elliot Shiner, which is going to be fantastic.
Can I leave you with something with Elliot?
Yes, please do.
And tell him I am the one who asked this question. His son played minor league baseball and was drafted by the Yankees. Ask him this question.
All right, hold on. I'm writing this down.
And the most important thing, and make sure you tell him that I asked you.
Yeah.
Elliot lives in Connecticut, I think, Westport or something.
Yeah, I think so.
And he has a wooden lathe, and he makes baseball bats.
Elliot does?
I want a fucking bat. Yeah.
Wow.
No shit. Okay. All right.
Yes, you ask him and tell him I brought this. When it comes to Q&A, say Carmen Rizzo has a question.
Oh, I'm gonna lead with that. We're not even getting to the Q&A. We're not gonna start the interview without
the whole
talking
thing
about
saying,
that.
I know you made a lot of records, Elliot. Do you make fucking baseball bats?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's all we're gonna talk
Awesome.
about. So
Thank you guys. I love you.
absolutely.
And really
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much.
Thank you.
Carmen, amazing. So
Awesome.
I'm gonna go to the thanks for watching screen and mute awkwardly, and because that's what I do every week. So that's what's gonna happen right